Chapter 54:39. Goodbye, Crow. Fine, the bear can stay. The old man was eventually persuaded. Congratulations, your legacy lives on after so many years. Li Chia said with a smile. Lives on, huh? The old man glanced at the bear before looking up at the sky. As an apex existence that had treated the world as food, he had no attachments and didn't think about leaving a legacy behind. The only thing was to survive, that would be his mark and legacy. Alas, this was no longer the case after his death. Li Chia exploded and obliterated him, delivering his true death. Therefore, given the inevitability of being forgotten, he thought about leaving behind a legacy. Alas, who was worthy of this? The greatest geniuses were mere ants in his eyes, unable to actually shoulder his greatness. Nonetheless, he eventually relented. Just 10 to 20% was good enough to become utterly dominant. Plus, the bear could actually exceed expectations and excel in the distant land. Try your best now, your destiny is in your hands. Li Chia patted the bear again. It let out a soft cry and rubbed its head against his hand, knowing that this was time for their separation. Splash. Splash. The water in the pond started boiling and became radiant. The rays seemed to have a corporeal characteristic and could be touched. Crow, this is goodbye. The old man stood up. Yes. Li Chia stood up as well to bid farewell to his once mortal foe. I wish you the best, but unfortunately, I will not see the day when you slay the heaven. The old man sighed. Be well now. Li Chia said. You too. The old man bowed slightly and disappeared from sight along with True Bear. The courtyard became particularly quiet with their departure. Nonetheless, its seal remained, blocking it from the rest of the world. 1 billion years could pass and the separation would still remain. Splash. A supreme beauty emerged with water droplets streaming down her body. Words couldn't describe her unparalleled appearance. She was blessed with a slender figure, long legs, and immaculate features, all culminating in a peerless charm and aura. Her long, lustrous hair flowed down to her waist. As it swayed gently, an ethereal aura oozed outward. Her anima focused on harmony with heaven and earth. Looking at her was akin to looking at all the beauties of the world. Anima had become so innate that just one smile or frown contained this profound affinity, striking the heart and leaving an indelible mark. A single glance would leave an unforgettable impression. Her wondrous image would always shine brightly in someone's memory, capable of helping them in their darkest moment. This purifying factor made her beauty extend beyond mere physical boundaries. Support us at bit.ly/3ibfjkv. She looked around, seemingly confused about her location and who had saved her. She didn't remember the circumstances of her death either. However, she finally saw Li Chia and trembled from being overwhelmed. As an apex cultivator, nothing could move her until his familiar figure today. The image of him was engraved in her memories. Thus, she immediately recognized him. Young master. She ran over into his embrace. It's really you. She didn't know what was going on since this could be a dream. It's me, I'm really here. He smiled and gently stroked her long hair. She hugged him tightly, afraid that he might disappear if she were to let go. A long while later, he said, long time no see. Yes, long time no see. She nodded and looked up carefully at him. You really did it. Have I ever failed before? He smiled. No, of course not. He said. She nestled in his chest for a moment before asking, is everything okay? Yes and no. Li Chia responded. And Heaven Guard? She asked. He sighed and comforted her, no longer around, they have accomplished their mission wonderfully, truly deserving of pride. It's inevitable. She sighed softly. After all, the rise and fall of sex were normal occurrences. Nothing could last forever. Why did you throw your life away? Was that necessary? He asked. I returned in order to warn you, young master. The situation is dire. Her expression became serious. I know, I noticed signs everywhere, not just from you. He said. Someone descended with a sinister plan. She revealed. Yes, within expectations, albeit a little soon. He nodded. Are you making your move now, young master? She asked. No rush. Your cultivation has crumbled, so let me take you to a place for recovery first. Otherwise, you'll turn into a mortal. He said. Chapter 5440. The Upper Continents had 4 alliances and 3 other great powers: Lesser Firmament, Azure Peak, and Pure Land. Lesser Firmament didn't interact with the world, rumored to be the home of ancient emperors and monarchs. Pure Land was another ancient lineage, a kingdom of Buddhism. Azure Peak was the newest among the 3 lineages, created by Azure Ancestor as a place for the sky spirits. It had stood strong for eras, not falling to any of the great wars. 2 main factors played into its survival: its neutrality and the immense strength of Azure Ancestor. Anyone in the upper continents would have to think really carefully before maneuvering against Azure Peak. Azure Ancestor came from 8 Desolaces. According to historical texts, the sky spirits only became a race after the ancestors' appearance. The coming of a new race signaled a change in the world. Of course, the ancestor didn't create this race, only the first of its kind. The ancestor went on to become the first Tao Lord of the race as well, eventually excelling enough to be considered one of the 10 greatest Tao Lords. The ancestor became even stronger after reaching the upper continents, being considered superior to all things and supreme, perhaps even apricot Tao Lord. However, after the foundation of Azure Peak, the ancestor never appeared again. Thus, the apex cultivators had no idea of the ancestor's true power. They didn't wish to have an unnecessary confrontation. In history, the 4 alliances had attempted to recruit Azure Peak only to fail. The only case of success was Sword Sky Tao Lord joining Tao Alliance alone. Everyone understood that the balance would break if Azure Peak were to change its neutral stance. It had no political agenda or ideology, only serving as the home for the sky spirits. This was a fundamental difference between Azure Peak and the 4 alliances. Li Qia and the woman appeared above Azure Peak and looked down to see a land brimming with majestic life force. They saw excitement and endless possibilities with a new race. A towering tree caught their attention next. Its branches and leaves encompassed the entire peak. Others called it Azure, but its real name was Galaxy. Even the stars rotated beneath its incalculable height. It became its own world with mountains and rivers. Waterfalls cascaded thunderously down from the top. Support us at Porid. Calm. Buildings and palaces were built on the branches by the sky spirits. White cranes soared in the air while large beasts roamed the branches. Some believed that the tree was planted by Azure Ancestor for the sake of creating a home. However, others believed that the tree was actually older than the ancestor and was transplanted from outer space. A third account stated that the tree has been here all along, albeit in a dormant and sealed state. The actual history no longer mattered since now, it belonged to the sky spirits alone. As long as the tree was still around, so would Azure Peak. A good place, so much life force. Li Qia nodded approvingly after taking a look at the magnificent scenery. There are peerless alchemy medicines here. The woman said softly. Alchemy Dao was known to have the highest quantity of alchemy fields and materials. However, for the best and oldest ones, Dao Lords and Conquerors would have to come to Azure Peak. Chapter 5447. The war between the people and the race started again, spreading destruction from the illusory realms to the upper continents. In spite of the continent's massive size, the auras of the apex cultivators and their followers could still be felt in all corners. More and more cultivators were dragged into this mess regardless of their wishes. Of course, most should have nothing to do with these battles because they could be reduced to ashes after one move. Casualties began approaching an incalculable number. Even powerful Dao Lords and Conquerors started to fall, a sign of continuous escalation. Rumble. Powers from the illusory realms continued to leak out into the actual world. The fabrics of the realms seemed to be torn apart. Weaker cultivators and mortals trembled in horror since they could feel the shock waves becoming stronger and stronger. They have lost control of their destiny. Death might come knocking at any moment and they wouldn't have a clue. After all, an uncontrolled blast could wipe out a kingdom in the blink of an eye. Thus, they actually didn't care about the victor, only praying for a swift end to the war. Survival mattered the most, not the ruling party. Once this spread to the entire upper continents, the winners would sit on empty thrones with no surviving subjects to rule. Boom! A blinding light erupted in Heaven Alliance due to the appearance of a supreme tower. Its ancient Tao laws possessed an incredible suppressive affinity. If it were to descend on the upper continents, it would instantly sink both. It seemed to have been around before the start of heaven and earth. The area within was nothing short of infinite. The Tower of Celestial Court. An ancient ancestor bellowed. It's reaching the climax, they want to end this. A neutral dragon lord shuddered. The tower was the ace card of Heaven Alliance, rumored to have been given to Light Dragon Conqueror by Celestial Court during his founding of the Alliance. Loud explosions and earthquakes took over the upper continents. However, this disaster didn't last long because another force seemed to be stabilizing it. Another blinding light appeared in a different location, connecting Tao and Imperial Alliance. This was a great wall exuding different colors, each color represented a particular divine metal. We are bit. ly/3IBFJKV, find us on Google. It stretched for billions of miles, seemingly capable of surrounding all of the upper continents. It could handle any attack, whether it be an ultimate blow from the Tao Lords and Conquerors or countless falling meteors. The various metals were embedded with runes and totems as well, the blessings from the wise sages. Haven Bulwark. Another shouted after seeing the walls, especially those from the people. It'll protect us. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief since the suppressive pressure started to dissipate. Earlier, the Tower of Celestial Court paralyzed everyone even though it was aiming at something else on the battlefield. Now, the walls were erected to stop the tower. Protecting the upper continents was only a byproduct. This will determine the future, we'll find out soon. An ancient ancestor gazed at the bulwark and commented. Chapter 54-48, What if the bulwark can't stop it? A dragon lord from the people was worried about the situation. According to the legends, this wall was built by countless top masters who contributed divine metals. Some believed that it was meant to stop the Tower of Celestial Court. During Emperor's War, both sides had activated their tower and wall. However, they didn't get a chance to use it due to Pure Sun Tao Lord's interference. This is the pivotal moment. An ancient ancestor trembled while watching the fight from afar. The initial skirmish had evolved into both sides using actual strategies prepared for eras now. The wall and the tower could decide everything. I don't care who wins, just end this already. Someone said, not caring about either side. The majority of inhabitants didn't care for the divide when their survival was on the line. Rumble. The tower finally made contact with the wall. The former pulsed brightly and controlled the power of the celestial bodies, wanting to push through. The wall also became resplendent and colorful, activating its fullest potential. The metals harmonized, their individual powers were stacked up into layers and became far more effective. Great figures appeared, the remnant forces of those who had blessed the wall in the past. Both focused the full brunt of their power on the battlefield. Alas, due to their size, everyone in the upper continents could see the fight clearly. The apex cultivators halted their individual fight and retreated to their camp, channeling their power into the respective artifact. Strands of power leaked into the upper continents, a single one could take down a kingdom. The top cultivators were already destructive on their own. Once together, the devastation multiplied and reached a different scale. Some of these cultivators had no problem unleashing devastation upon the rest of the world. They found that casualties were just a part of war even when they numbered in the billions. Rumble. Both sides didn't hold back and gave everything they had to power the artifacts. We are Pori.com, find us on Google. It seemed to be a stalemate, the tower couldn't take down the wall in just a short time. Buzz. Another portal appeared on the battlefield, a group of cultivators wearing regal outfits and possessing impressive auras. They were led by a dazzling youth who would always be at the center of attention due to his presence. He seemed capable of stopping time itself and gave people a sense of security. The Imperial Clan. Neutral spectators became serious after seeing them. Only the mightiest dragon lords and conquerors could stand close enough to watch. Regular cultivators and ancestors were stuck in the upper continents, completely frozen from the pressure. Li Jitian and his clan. Someone murmured. The progenitor of the clan was none other than the renowned Crimson Emperor. They were a pillar of Heaven Alliance. Their absence was certainly noticed in the war until now. Reinforcement for Heaven Alliance. A dragon lord commented. Buzz. Another portal appeared near the battlefield, allowing a different group to come out. They lacked the Imperial clan's regal aura but seemed to be even stronger. Chapter 54-49, Buddhist Emperor. The Dragon Lords and Conquerors in the group varied in age. However, their auras were full of youthful vigor. This lineage was clearly not as old as the Imperial clan. The leader was an ordinary-looking old man, yet the rest still treated him with reverence. He hid an impressive physique beneath his plain robe. His white beard looked rather stiff and prickly to the touch. His broad shoulders and robust hands made him look trustworthy and willing to bear any burden. Principal Conqueror and the Lu are here too. Spectators became even more startled than during the appearance of the Imperial clan. Principal Conqueror is finally making a move? A dragon lord took a deep breath. Are they helping Divine Alliance? Those on the side of the people didn't like this development, especially the ones involved in the battle. The Imperial clan was powerful, but they were no longer in their prime. They lacked an apex cultivator, so they posed a limited threat to either side. The same couldn't be said about Principal Conqueror and his clan, a force capable of tipping the scales. The Lu was in their prime with many capable cultivators, but most importantly, Principal Conqueror was another apex cultivator. This is it, potentially the deciding factor. A dragon lord took a deep breath. Previously, the Lu was considered the strongest clan in the upper continents. However, Principal Conqueror abdicated and his clan also left Divine Alliance. They lived reclusively afterward, and everyone thought that they were finished with the conflict. Alas, their sudden appearance could change the outcome of this battle. Spectators thought that both the Imperial clan and the Lu were on the side of the race. Although the Lu had a soured relationship with Divine Alliance, this was still their home for a long period in history. It made sense that they would show up during this existential crisis. N-0 Velbin. The arrival of these two factions could bring a swift end to the conflict. /Pia boom. A divine beam descended, paving the way for an old man and his legion. He was massive with a metallic body, looking like an unbreakable pillar. The members of the legion were just as impressive visually. When he slightly tilted, everyone could see a girl standing on his shoulder. She possessed a timeless presence, as if she was the source of an entire race. Everyone could sense a terrifying power oozing from her delicate frame. Azure Ancestor, Sentinel Treant. A neutral conqueror couldn't believe it. Azure Peak is here too. One Dao Lord put on a serious expression. I can't believe it, they're joining this too. One Dragon Lord commented in astonishment due to the historical neutrality of Azure Peak. Furthermore, Azure Ancestor had not left Azure Peak for eras now. Are they here to help the people? A Dragon Lord from the race wondered. Right, they should be with the people. His friend whispered. The reason was due to the perceived close relationship between Azure Peak and Dao Alliance. Moreover, Sword Sky Dao Lord was a sky spirit as well. Who knows? Azure Peak is from 8 Desolaces, it might be here for another reason? A Dao Lord from 8 Desolaces shook her head. 8 decilaces didn't have the notion of the people and the race. This classification was unique to the 6 continents. Thus, Azure Peak shouldn't have that many attachments to the people. Nonetheless, it should be noted that Dao and Imperial Alliance had many Dao lords who came from 8 decilaces. In that sense, Azure Peak would have closer ties to them due to sharing the same background. Buzz. A Buddhist bridge formed on the horizon and landed near the battlefield as well. Buddhist hymns could be heard, painting the images of hallowed beings in everyone's mind even before their appearance. Pure Land too. Listeners became emotional. Sure enough, high monks appeared on the bridge. Each of them had totems and images of 7-floor pagodas, inspiring a profound sense of reverence in all spectators. Chapter 5450, Ancient Princess. The monks accompanied by hallowed hymns were a sight to behold. They seemed to be leading Buddha back to the mortal world to deliver peace and salvation. Pure Land is joining this as well. A Dao Lord understood that these were the greatest monks from that region. Regular monks didn't possess these visual phenomena. Pure Land was one of the 7 great powers in the upper continents, perhaps the oldest. The 4 alliances were relatively young and their history was known. As for Pure Land, it was rumored to have been around before the 6 continents. Some said that it dates back to the previous epoch. Thus, little was known about its history and origin. Its power was also incalculable as well since it focused on salvation and spreading Buddhism. It didn't participate in the struggle between the people and the race since everyone was considered equal. Because of this neutral stance, it had never displayed its true power and resources before. Nonetheless, most historians considered Pure Land to be stronger than any single alliance. Therefore, apex cultivators exercised restraint whenever they visited Pure Land. In fact, Pure Land remained standing even during the perilous eras when Celestial Court reigned unchecked. The latter never provoked Pure Land previously, a testament to its power. Legend told the tales of wondrous cultivators of Buddhism living there. They possessed powers and abilities beyond imagination. Some went as far as saying that if Pure Land wanted to be in the immortal continent, it would be equal to Celestial Court, Immortal Dao City, and Imperial Field. The magnificent spectacle resulted in the entrance of an otherworldly woman. She wore a Buddhist robe and an ancient crown while possessing a noble aura accentuated by the Buddhist affinity. This was a rare combination, but it manifested flawlessly around her. With just one glance, one would think of her as a supreme ruler in charge of countless beings. Of course, this wasn't a rare sight because conquerors and Dao lords would have something similar. However, her Buddhist light and halos made her look like a natural-born Buddhist, destined to be enlightened. Who knows if this aura was innate or fostered by her profound knowledge of Buddhism? Either way, as she walked across the bridge, the 2 different affinities existed in harmony and caused others to gasp in astonishment. An emperor reigned in the mortal world while a Buddhist transcended the mortal coil. These 2 paths typically ran counter to each other, yet she managed to achieve something remarkable. Jilin, Buddhist Emperor. Someone immediately recognized her. 1. A truly time-worn existence. Another commented while appreciating her beauty. The Buddhist robe didn't hinder her physical attractiveness and only made her more unique. Some said that one would be hard-pressed to find an older being than her in the upper continents. She was a peerless princess in the last epoch who chose to cultivate Buddhism. Few had the pleasure to meet her in person, but everyone knew about her legends. The most powerful being who had roamed the world from Pure Land was Meru, Buddhist Emperor, whom many believed to be Jilin, Buddhist Emperor's disciple. 2. There were accounts of Blessed Dao Lord himself visiting Pure Land to ask Jilin, Buddhist Emperor, about the path of Buddhism. All these tales told the world how unfathomable Pure Land and Jilin, Buddhist Emperor were. No one expected her to show up, a being older and more powerful than all things Dao Lord and his peers. She didn't show up during the previous Emperor's war or during the signing of the Pact of Blessed. Nove LB, in which side will they be on? A dragon lord murmured. The Imperial clan and the Lu might be able to decide this battle, but Pure Land will decide the entire war. A powerful spectator believed that Pure Land alone outmatched the two clans. After arriving, Jilin Buddhist emperor simply observed the contest between the tower and the wall. Her stance remained unclear. The monks behind her closed their eyes, seemingly entering a state of meditation. Wait, if they do not interfere, I have no idea what the outcome will be. Another commented after seeing the three powers merely spectating. Meanwhile, the stalemate continued despite both sides' full efforts in empowering their artifact. Boom! Something suddenly exploded in the territory of Divine Alliance. 1. Jilin was a clan back in the 10 worlds. 2. This was Sumeru, changing to Meru. Chapter 54-51, Trembling in Horror, Buzz. Sharp rays pierced the sky around Divine Alliance, slightly resembling blades with a hook attached at the end. They could cut down anything, even time itself or the karmic cycle. It's finally appearing. Principal Conqueror sighed after seeing this. Ancestor, what are they? A dragon lord of the Lu asked. Celestial Hook, an artifact secretly crafted by Divine Alliance with the help of Celestial Court. Principal responded. Is it as strong as Celestial Tower? The Dragon Lord became surprised. Each is useful in its own way. I'm afraid Dao and Imperial Alliance will be unable to stop this with the bulwark alone. Principal concluded. NOVLBN, they're too close to Celestial Court now. A Conqueror said. The majority of the Lu was once part of Divine Alliance. Under Principal's leadership, Divine Alliance focused on peace and prosperity with the people. Alas, older members of the Alliance hailed from the 3 great races. Because of this, they naturally gravitated toward Celestial Court and Heaven Alliance. This caused a rift between the Lu and them. In order to avoid needless bloodshed and remain neutral, Principal Conqueror abdicated. Sword Sea Dao Lord, his successor, walked a different path than this and changed the direction of Divine Alliance. This was a fair and legitimate succession, so they didn't face any opposition. With that, they were able to obtain Celestial Court's help in creating a new artifact. It required special natural treasures and metals on top of blessings from top cultivators, capable of slaying emperors and conquerors. Principal had known of its existence and didn't wish for his men to die fighting it. Boom! The momentum in Divine Alliance finally gathered in one place and took the shape of a gigantic hook. It pulsed with a frightening light. Each strand could cut down the stars. This was the highest culmination of sharpness. Just looking at the hook alone caused spectators to feel a sharp pain in their eyes. This wasn't due to the brightness of the rays but rather, the sharp affinity they exuded. What is this thing? They lacked information on this artifact. Although they had seen sharp blades before, those weapons were dull and blunt in comparison. Be ready. All things shouted. His allies' expressions soured as well. The hook immediately latched onto the wall after manifesting into reality but didn't activate its power just yet. Haven Bulwark was known for being unbreakable by external force. The only thing in the upper continents capable of damaging it was Celestial Tower. Both were made from priceless materials and augmented by the best of the best. They were equally matched, resulting in a delicate balance. Alas, there was an unprecedented development today. A strange hum came from the hook, sounding ominous and chilling. This was akin to a sharp object grinding against a sheet of metal. The hook's sharpness couldn't be bested. Nonetheless, it still couldn't cut down the wall in a short time. Nonetheless, the inexhaustible force behind the hook began to make an incision on the wall while leaving a piercing grind. This was an unfavorable development for the people because after all this time, the tower couldn't visibly damage the wall. Now, it seemed that a breakthrough was only a matter of time. Rumble. The tower focused its power on the deep mark, striking it with the utmost force in order to help the hook. The world trembled incessantly before their onslaught. Living beings in the upper continents suffered under the weight of the tower, feeling as if they were being struck as well. Some vomited blood, unable to endure for much longer. No more, no more. They trembled in horror, not wanting to perish in this manner. Chapter 54-52, Culmination of an Eternal Plan. Boom. Haven bulwark also shook violently. Its built momentum became unstable. Crack. Large cracks finally appeared around the impact point. Watch it. All Things shouted and warned his men. It seemed that their lifelong effort was to be for naught. Boom. The tower finally smashed down and left a massive hole in the wall. The power of the artifacts rushed through the opening and reduced several top cultivators to blood. With their formation and momentum in disarray, the empowerment on the wall crumbled into nothingness. Retreat. All Things could see that this situation was beyond remedy. The people lost. Spectators from afar finally felt the suppression coming from the tower. The same applied to ordinary cultivators and mortals. Divine and Heaven alliance will reign uncontested? They started thinking about future ramifications. The appearance of Celestial Hook had broken the delicate balance in the upper continents. Henceforth, Dao and Imperial alliance could only be on the defensive or retreat. Unfortunately, they couldn't retreat quickly because the Hook had sealed their escape paths. All Things, Sword Queen, Darkfrost, and Calamity roared and utilized their strongest merit laws, wanting to break a dimensional path to escape. Alas, the tower came over and suppressed them as well. Li Jitian and Principal Conqueror took a deep breath, realizing that this was over. The tower and Hook only needed time to eventually destroy these apex cultivators, grinding their Dao fruits and true fate down to nothingness. Meanwhile, the members of Divine and Heaven had total control over the situation. Nonetheless, Supreme and his allies remained cautious and gazed outside the battlefield at the other powers. If Azure Peak and Pure Land were to take action, they might be distracted enough for All Things to break free. The neutral parties exchanged glances, calculating their next move and who were potential allies. Thus, although the people had clearly lost, this seemed to be a waiting period for the next battle. Brothers, there is no salvaging this situation. It is not too late to surrender. Supreme spoke confidently and without arrogance, wanting to persuade his enemies to give up. Only to follow Celestial Court? Calamity Dao Lord laughed. That is negotiable. Supreme said calmly, devising a plan to end this risky stalemate. There's nothing to negotiate, I rather die than yield to Celestial Court. Calamity raised his voice. Brother, do reconsider, no one can change the outcome today. Supreme spoke earnestly, seemingly ready to forgive his enemies. You sound rather confident. All Things found this strange. Sure, they have lost this battle. However, this wasn't the first war between the people and the race. With the exception of immemorial epoch when the people were the underdogs from the start, the subsequent wars were rather even with both sides seizing victory in various battles. Therefore, victory and defeat were only temporary. The sides suffering a devastating defeat didn't take long to rise again. However, Supreme's demeanor was different this time. Velbin, the culmination of an eternal plan to establish domination in one strike. Supreme said, the truth is that there is no saving the people. Come work with us, we shall build a new world. As your hounds, I'm sure. Calamity said sarcastically. Brother, Celestial Court is destined to rule the world for all of eternity. Join us and be a part of something great. You will be able to protect the remnant of the people as well, a magnificent achievement. Supreme said. That is a bold declaration regarding Celestial Court. Darkfrost said. Cultivators at their level never boast and choose their words carefully. This was especially true for Supreme, who was in a leadership position. Thus, his confidence in Celestial Court seemed immensely high at the moment. Keep in mind that although Celestial Court was strong, the people were far from being weak. There were still Immortal Dao City and Imperial Field in the Immortal Continent. With their help, the people in the upper continents would be able to launch an impressive assault to change the tides. Chapter 54-53, young master. The name of Celestial Court alone struck fear into the people back in the ancient epoch. However, a different era started after Skysplitter with the rise of Imperial Field and Immortal Dao City. Nov. LB/ and the Duck Egg Buyer and allies made it all the way to Celestial Court, seizing one victory after another and eventually sealing Celestial Court. Later on, other conflicts occurred with mixed results. Thus, no one could claim absolute domination, not even Celestial Court. Today, Supreme's confidence was met by skepticism and dread. After all, Supreme was far from being the blustering type. Since he had a direct connection to Celestial Court, did he have access to certain information not privy to others? I am speaking nothing but the truth. Know that when Celestial Court returns, it will take over the world. Supreme said. Other Apex cultivators exchanged glances, feeling that there was something amiss regarding Supreme's confidence. Death is the other option. Immortal Pagoda Conqueror had a tougher stance than Supreme. We can deliver judgment now. To hear Immortal Pagoda say this himself surprised Sword Sea and Eternal Conqueror. The atmosphere became increasingly ominous. Although they were siding with the race currently, they were not part of Celestial Court. They could kill all things and the others today, but this might not have an absolute effect on the eternal conflict. Sooner or later, Imperial Field and Immortal Dao City would send help to the upper continents and a reversal remained a possibility. Alas, what was this eternal plan to establish domination from Celestial Court? Currently, Celestial Court didn't have control over the immortal continent. The people have risen, becoming a worthy foe. You can't even capture the 2 continents, let alone all 6. Our Dao and Imperial Alliance aren't the only powers here. Calamity laughed, acting boisterously, but in reality, he wanted to pry more information out of Supreme. The outcome is obvious now, struggling is useless. Not a single soul can stop the inevitable, the reign of Celestial Court. I sincerely advise all of you to take me seriously. Supreme insisted. All of you, here included Azure Peak, Pure Land, and any other powers in the upper continents. Listeners naturally understood the implication. This only made things more confusing. Was he not afraid of these powers interfering and saving the prisoners? His absolute confidence could backfire here and revert the situation. No mercy to the dissidents, no exception when the might of the heaven descends. Immortal Pagoda repeated in a domineering fashion, mirroring his prideful attitude. Might of the heaven? Celestial Court thinks too highly of themselves. A bunch of ragpickers think they can represent the high heaven? A leisurely voice answered instead. All eyes turned toward the speaker right away. They saw an ordinary man walking in the sky, approaching the battlefield. Li Qia. He was no stranger to anyone at this point. Ha ha ha. Calamity burst out in laughter and said, Our young master is finally here, Celestial Court is done for. He kneeled on the ground and shouted, Young master, it has been eras since I last paid my respect to you. This startled everyone. An apex cultivator was down on his knees. Jilin Buddhist Emperor immediately rushed over and prostrated before him. Young master, how long have I waited for this moment? Her eyes became slightly moist while she was near him. Spectators couldn't believe their own eyes. This time, it was someone stronger than any of the current combatants. Attained all 8 enlightenments to such a high level, well done. Li Qia glanced down and praised her, recognizing her as Jilin Menjing from the 10 worlds. I am a mere firefly in comparison. My achievements are due to your guidance alone, young master. She said. Principal Conqueror brought his men over as well. He prostrated and said, My lord, my descendants and I apologize for the lack of proper reception. Please forgive us. He was the one who sold himself to Li Qia, serving as a servant while keeping his true identity a secret. Others were shocked to see this with a few exceptions, Li Zhitian included. Benefactor, we respectfully welcome you. Azure Ancestor led the members of Azure Peak over and kneeled as well. Chapter 54-54, Astonishment. Li Zhitian and the members of the Imperial clan joined the group, also paying their respect to Li Qie. Of course, no one had any surprises left to give at this point after witnessing several monsters previously. Prior to this, they already knew how frightening Li Qie was, defeating both Immortal Pagoda and Eternal Conqueror with a single move. Illumination Conqueror in his empowered state was swiftly defeated as well. Nonetheless, a disparity in power didn't necessitate a subservient display. This was something unprecedented in the upper continents, for a single cultivator to be so prestigious and influential. Even those who came from Celestial Court didn't enjoy this treatment. Top cultivators had too much pride to become sycophants. Alas, everyone could see that Calamity, Jilin Buddhist Emperor, Azure Ancestor, and others truly revered Li Qie. This changed everything regarding previous speculations of Li Kai's identity and background. Who is he? Conquerors and Dragon Lords shared the same question. Only a supreme and ancient existence could cause these cultivators to act in this manner. Stand up. Li Qie waved and gave permission. The others stood up. Jilin Buddhist Emperor seemed to be the one most affected by this long-awaited meeting. He smiled and gently stroked her hair before entering the battlefield. Supreme and his peers were shaken mentally to see Li Kai's involvement. They involuntarily took one step back. Other members of Heaven and Divine Alliance felt the same way, thinking that it was harder to breathe. Li Qie still appeared unremarkable with no aura or might emanating from him. He looked plain and unassuming, outmatched by any conqueror or Dao Lord. Nonetheless, there was an inexplicable pressure as if the high heaven itself was pressing down on them. Nove. LB/ND would have feared him even without seeing the display of reverence prior. He was clearly someone above the apex. They recalled Illumination Conqueror in his dream state, borrowing enough power to fight 4 apex cultivators alone. Alas, Li Qie still smashed him effortlessly. They felt tiny and insignificant for once while facing this horrifying foe. It is not too late to scatter. Li Kai's eyes scanned the group. The targets of his gaze trembled as if the glances alone could kill them. They had a solemn expression, aware of a potentially fatal battle. They had the upper hand with the tower and the hook, capable of killing any conqueror or Dao Lord with enough time. However, they weren't sure that this would work on Li Qie. Sir, no one questions your invincibility. Supreme took a deep breath, still being cool and collected despite facing Li Qie. Do you stand with the people now? As I've said, I do not care for your conflict. My issue lays with Celestial Court. Li Qie responded. Please elaborate, sir. If you are dissatisfied with Celestial Court, I will relay the message. Supreme bowed. Despite being a representative of Celestial Court, Supreme didn't dare to be imperious this time, choosing to be humble instead. This was far, far from the norm. Good, erase the message. Tell the geezers there to wash their necks since they'll be chopping their head off and flattening their court. Li Qie said with a smile. Since no one thought that Li Kai's words were mere empty boasts at this point, they became shocked even more. This was by no means an empty threat. He certainly would carry through with his declaration even if it meant fighting Celestial Court. Chapter 54-55. Time to pick a side. Early on during the new epoch, Celestial Court accused many of being sinners and enforced their rule over the world. They rarely suffered setbacks, one of which being Maddened Flame leaving behind a burning crater in their region. Later on, the Duck Egg Buyer and his allies only made it to the gate. Next, the coalition of female heroes also couldn't take them down. Thus, Li Kai's declaration was rather bold given the historical precedents. Purewood Emperor couldn't do so, neither did the Unstoppable Empress. Most importantly, his tone was so casual as if this was no big deal. His opponents couldn't believe what they were hearing. Flattening Celestial Court? Immortal Pagoda's eyes flashed intimidatingly. This was enough to make others tremble, but not Li Qie. Is this supposed to be difficult? Li Qie responded. Of course, he was merely stating facts, but others interpreted this differently. Immortal Pagoda didn't respond, his brows furrowed in frustration. He had utterly lost to Li Chia before, even his grotto was burnt down. Sir, I cannot stop you from wanting to destroy Celestial Court. The only thing I can do is perform my duty loyally. Supreme took a deep breath and said. He admitted his incapability yet did not yield. You would still try? Li Chia smiled. N-O/V-E-L-/B-1, N, your power is unfathomable by the likes of us. Alas, I have a duty that I cannot abandon. I am but an ant before you, but there are times when ants will bare their fangs. Supreme said. Ha ha ha, an interesting fella. Li Chia smiled and said, what will you do? All attack together while relying on those things? Having said that, he glanced at the tower and Hook still imprisoning all things and his allies. Those from Heaven and Divine Alliance felt that there was a mountain weighing down on their chest. They all knew that a single apex cultivator had no chance of fighting Li Chia. They could only rely on two things, their number advantage and the two artifacts created by Celestial Court. Of course, the probability of success seemed unfavorable. Supreme felt as if he was staring at the high heaven. The mere pressure alone was daunting. We can only do our best if you wish to fight, sir. Supreme said firmly, still maintaining his composure. And I will give you the chance. But first, let us see how many are willing to die for Celestial Court. He said with a smirk. Supreme looked back at his allies and said, Celestial Court will be the light in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, are you willing to fight with me and welcome the new era? They became startled. Some exchanged glances. Heaven Alliance stands with Celestial Court. We do not back down from any challenge. Immortal Emperor Su Kong spoke resolutely and represented Heaven Alliance. We will not back down. The other members wished to join Supreme. Heaven Alliance's unity was commendable. From the weak to the strong, they were willing to support Supreme. Something about him had won them over. How about you all? Supreme asked Divine Alliance, a much more complicated situation. It consisted of many members originating from the three races. The older generation also strongly supported Celestial Court. However, some joined for different reasons. This was no longer a fight between the race and the people but rather, whether they wished to plead loyalty to Celestial Court. Some of them wanted to fight for the race to the death but fighting for Celestial Court? This was an entirely different matter. They stared at their leader, Swordse Dao Lord, and waited for his vote. I would fight for Divine Alliance but am not interested in risking my life for Celestial Court. Swordse made up his mind. His stance was of utmost importance and could sway the opinion of his fellow allies. The race only stands strong due to the existence of Celestial Court. An old emperor from the last generation of Divine Alliance said. I have no relation to the race either. Swordse wasn't afraid of offending anyone. Chapter 54-56, New Leader. As an Apex Dao Lord, no one could force him against his will. He continued, Gentlemen, I joined Divine Alliance for Divine Alliance, not for the race or Celestial Court. You all knew this and supported me in becoming the Guardian. Nonetheless, feel free to make your own choice. For those who wish to follow me, I will still serve Divine Alliance wholeheartedly. Otherwise, I have no issue returning this position either. The group fell into silence, everyone had their own opinion. He's not one of us and can't be trusted. Someone among them said. Swordse didn't care to find out who it was either and walked to a different side. Yi Fantian followed him without saying anything. You can enter Celestial Court and rule in the future. A last-gen monarch advised against her decision. I have nothing but gratitude for Divine Alliance and the Dao Lord. I shall follow him. Yi Fantian shook her head. Five Sun and a few Dao Lords and Conquerors also joined him, displaying a clear rift in Divine Alliance. After all, those from 8 Desolaces didn't join for Celestial Court or the race. N. 0 VLBN, the Emperor established Divine Alliance to support Celestial Court. We are following his will. The last-gen monarch said, bringing up profound emperor. We support Celestial Court. The remaining members stuck with Supreme. Brother, we need you to take charge of Divine Alliance. Another old cultivator asked Eternal Conqueror, who has yet to make a decision. Given his status and background, he was indeed qualified to become the new guardian of Divine Alliance. I came to pay a debt and it is nearly enough. I am staying to see Sir's Dao, but please find someone else for I am not responsible for Divine Alliance. Unfortunately, Eternal Conqueror refused. Their morale dropped drastically since they had just lost 2 apex cultivators and some others who chose to follow Sword Sea Dao Lord. Alas, there was nothing they could do. Eternal Conqueror was not a member of Divine Alliance and was only here to repay a debt. Most importantly, he had never gotten along with Celestial Court. It would be irrational for him to risk his life for an undesirable endeavor. Divine Alliance found itself to be a headless snake. Although it still had powerful members, it needed an apex cultivator to take charge. How about me? Immortal Pagoda Conqueror suggested, revitalizing the bleak atmosphere. He was heaven's favorite, blessed with innate gifts, clearly a great candidate for the role. Although he was clearly on the side of the people in Heaven Alliance, none had been able to order him around. His prestige in the upper continents could only be matched by Supremes, if that. In fact, if he had shown any interest in leading Heaven Alliance, he might have been its leader. However, he preferred to cultivate in his grotto instead of participating in politics. The members of Divine Alliance didn't wish to ask him earlier because he was a part of Heaven Alliance. Not having a leader might cause more rifts within their faction. They might start fighting for the role before having a chance to unite against Wuxia. Now, the prideful cultivator's initiative was an amazing development. This would improve the relationship between Heaven and Divine Alliance as well. The loyalists in Divine Alliance could now officially join Celestial Court. The neutrality built by Principal Conqueror is gone now. Years of hard work for nothing. A spectating Conqueror sighed after seeing this. Divine Alliance was no longer the same after his abdication. It seemed that it would be a second Heaven Alliance, fully obeying the commands of Celestial Court. So this is the path chosen. Principal himself let out a sigh of regret after seeing this. Chapter 54-57, for the Dao Divine Alliance was once unified again with this new leadership, becoming a part of Celestial Court. The dissenters have left alongside Sword Sea Dao Lord, leaving the loyalists behind. Although they lost a number of powerful cultivators, the transformation was thorough and arguably necessary. It grew closer to Heaven Alliance, allowing them to have a common goal and strategy. Divine Alliance shall not yield either. The members came to the same conclusion, prompting Wuxia to chuckle. Pound 1 and Swordsea chuckled as well, no longer interested in the current alliance. I am not on any side but still wish to see your power, sir. May I have this privilege? He laughed and asked Wuxia. He was not afraid despite Li Kai's repeated victories over apex cultivators. Everyone could tell that he was above this level. You're stealing the words out of my mouth. Eternal Conqueror added. Why not? One by one or all together? Wuxia smiled, suggesting something that only he could do. One, of course, no one had a problem with his domineering attitude at this point. This was how it should be. Putting our stance aside, who wouldn't wish to fight against you and learn, sir? Supreme said. 1-on-1, I have a technique I wish to try. The imperious Immortal Pagoda said, I believe that it is at the limit of the Tao, sir. These two put aside the feud for now and wanted to learn more about the mysteries of the Grand Tao. They spoke from the viewpoint of a conqueror and a dragon lord, not the messenger of Celestial Court and leader of Divine Alliance. They became juniors eager to learn in the presence of an esteemed master. Only a few actually had the intention of challenging him for the sake of the Tao. I see. I will oblige then since it might well be your last wish. Wuxia smiled. 0. The ominous words left listeners in fear. Nonetheless, the actual challengers had no intention of retreating. 0. Learning the Tao in the morning and dying in the evening, I am content with that. Immortal Pagoda laughed and declared. 1. His words echoed in everyone's mind, causing them to realize the gravity of the situation, reminding them of a certain something. 0. Many conquerors and Tao lords have forgotten this phrase and the mindset when seeking the Tao. 0. After reaching this level, they considered themselves to be unstoppable and stopped actively learning from someone else. Cultivation became a personal endeavor since who was qualified to teach them the Tao. 0. Alas, they recalled the early days when they were awfully happy to listen to Tao lectures, hoping to gain a sliver of the Tao each day. This was their initial aspiration during their journey. Unfortunately, the longer they traveled, the more they forgot about this feeling. 0. Well, can't argue with that. Sword C couldn't help but laugh. I will be content as well. Let me go first. 0. No order, just strike as we wish, how about that? Supreme, who has always been aloof and calm, regained a youthful passion that could be seen by anyone. 0. Do as you please. Li Qie smiled. 0. I start then. I'll show you the sword that I've sought my entire life. Sword C couldn't wait any longer. 0. Very well. Li Qie said. 0. Spectators watched with bated breath because this incoming technique was certainly Sword C's strongest. His sword Tao came from one of the 9 paths of finality, a heavenly scripture. As an apex cultivator, he should be able to deliver its potential. 3. Clank. He unsheathed his sword, but this didn't quite matter because he was one with it in the first place. 0. It didn't actually matter whether it was an ultimate artifact or a regular iron blade, since Sword C was the blade itself. He turned into a sword Tao. Attacking required his thought alone, not a physical weapon. 0. Favorite. Chapter 54-58. Oceanic/spectators somehow forgot about his identity and power, only seeing a blade before them. 0. Boom. His 12 Tao fruits became resplendent. He pulsed brightly with an ocean of chaos true energy. 0. A magnificent anima tree appeared in the center of his fate palaces and Tao fruits. It illuminated the region and granted him incredible power. 0. Clank. His Tao turned heaven and earth into his blade, an omnipotent and omnipresent attack. If he imagined his sword piercing the opponent, it would manifest into reality. 0. Spectators felt the presence of his sword Tao and looked up in the sky. An ocean of swords could be seen, still ever expanding. Eventually, this Tao was everywhere. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to walk forward without being pierced. 0. This technique was the perfect embodiment of his title, Sword C. 0. Oceanic slash. He shouted, but no one could see him through the countless swords. 0. Divine swords immediately surrounded the target. One required untold power in order to escape the blockade. Alas, they would find themselves trapped between more waves. 0. Clank. The hum of the swords came from all directions and temporal branches, past, present, and future. 0. There had been invincible swordsmen in the past, some dominated today with their blades, and more would do so in the future. All of their swords and techniques were encompassed in Sword C's attack. 0. Oceanic slash was the beginning and final destination, containing the ultimate profundity of this Tao. 0. Nove LB, in other sword masters including Darkfrost, Sword Queen, and Supreme were in awe. They admitted that this technique alone would add Sword C to the list of the greatest sword users in history. 0. Clank. It cut down all dimensions and timelines, leaving only death behind. 0. Heart blade. Li Qie smiled and murmured. 0. He needed nothing, no technique or a physical sword. As long as his heart wished so, his thoughts would turn into invisible blades. 0. This was the opposite of Sword C's boundless ocean of divine swords. Li Kai's attack couldn't be seen at all. 0. Nonetheless, it protected him from Sword C's onslaught and astounded the apex cultivators. the world wouldn't be able to find a superior sword. 0-inch my Dao. Eternal Conqueror took action as well, revealing his resplendent anima tree. 0 He took one step forward and released his perfect eternal aura. It happened so quickly, the summoning and activation process were too swift for cultivators to detect. 0 Time seemingly came to a halt as his Dao connected him with heaven and earth. He became a river of time flowing through all three timelines. 0-inch's fact, everyone felt as if time no longer mattered in his presence. They could now pick a timeline, going back to when they were 18 or enjoying their power during their prime. 0 His Dao made everything seem illusory and dreamlike. However, the past and the future could somehow be grasped. 0 Of course, he was the only one in actual control. 0-inch eternity. He roared and activated his bloodline, Divine Eternal. Its power quietly infiltrated the river of time and painted it bright red. 0 The river became increasingly dazzling and impressive, seemingly overcoming the restraints of time and granting him true immortality. 0-inch simply incredible. A spectator shouted. 0 Time no longer left its mark on the Conqueror. No power could destroy his current state, for he was truly eternal. This was the man who went against celestial court without facing any consequences. 0-inch This Dao, as ephemeral as the clouds. Li Chia glanced at the Dao and epochs passed by within his eyes. 0 He looked back at history and saw nothing but dispersing clouds, whether it be the brightest river of time or the mightiest cultivators. Nothing lasted forever. One favorite. Chapter 54-59, Emotions make me not an eternity passed by in the blink of an eye. Nothing was worth remembering due to their ephemeral nature, whether it be invincible emperors, beautiful fairies, and unbeatable legends. Even an apex cultivator was as insignificant as a speck of dust compared to the timeline in Li Kai's eyes, not worth a single coin. Li Kai's existence robbed everyone of their confidence despite their indomitable Dao heart. They finally had a taste of a long-forgotten sensation, fear. Nonetheless, Supreme didn't falter despite having a taste of fear. He made his move and summoned his sacred tree for a void thrust. When people saw his colossal tree and special attack, they could see why he was unique and comparable to apex Dao lords and conquerors. He relied on his Dao alone for his current achievements instead of despicable means. Clank. His slash encompassed only the immaculate void, not any murderous affinity and the stench of blood. However, he reserved something special for Li Chia, adding emotions to his attack. It morphed from the void to having other affinities, the apex of his attack. This was the first time spectators saw him using a more traditional sword technique. Of course, it differed from everything else since it had a void state prior to the transformation. His void was superior to all things, making it deadly. However, his manifested compassion could pierce the heart instantly. After all, everyone had emotions since they were living beings, not rocks. Having emotions rendered one vulnerable to his thrust. The mysterious scope of this Dao exceeded the fundamentals of the sword. It entangled itself with earthly matters and took advantage of their weaknesses. Everyone saw the transformed thrust piercing Li Kai's heart. Emotions make me not. They heard his voice and he no longer seemed to be there. The blade pierced emotions, not Li Chia, since he had assumed a mysterious form. Perhaps this was the right way of using anima. Emotions and everything else weren't the true self. NOVLB1 and everyone else became startled, his opponents and the prisoners from the people included. In this split second, they sensed something new with anima. The apex cultivators have seen anima and embarked on the path toward everlasting life. However, how did Li Chia assume a state of anime without activating his Dao fruits or revealing his tree? Each of them felt something different, but one thing was for certain, they became slightly closer to anima. Was this the next level and true meaning of anima? Due to their immense talent and comprehension, they instantly became enlightened just by watching him. Alas, there was no time for some of them. Immortal Pagoda Conqueror thought that this was the right opportunity to attack. Since Li Qie changed his state to something strange in order to avoid Supreme's incorporeal slash, perhaps he was weakened defensively. My turn. Immortal Pagoda revealed his anima tree with only a single Dao fruit. The latter was different from everyone else, looking larger and containing more Dao profundities. If a single Dao fruit could contain a single Supreme Grand Dao, this one could definitely contain many more. The primordial fruit. Spectators were in awe to see it for the first time. After all, few in history were fortunate enough to possess them. Moreover, they had entered the immortal continent long ago. Immortal Pagoda was the only one with this fruit in the upper continents. One primordial fruit alone was enough for anyone, no need to obtain 12. Chapter 5460, Total Sweep. If audio player doesn't work, press stop then play button again. Chapter 5460, Total Sweep. A primordial presence engulfed the world in a suppressive fashion. It worked differently than the aura of a 12-fruit Dao Lord or Conqueror. The latter made everyone feel as if there was a great mountain pressing down on them. As for the primordial fruit, this pressure stemmed from their own blood, talent, origin, and cultivation. This pressure couldn't be resisted. After all, one could push up or shoulder a mountain. In this case, resistance seemed futile since it came from the source. A 12-fruit cultivator might not be able to stop this pressure by activating their own power. Dao Lords and Conquerors took a deep breath, understanding that a primordial fruit was truly matchless. Just its aura alone reigned superior to their own. Boom! An immortal pagoda appeared and shouldered the primordial fruit. This artifact didn't belong in the mortal world, seemingly originating from a higher realm and possessing untold destructive potential. It became the ruler of space, the deliverer of death. Beyond immortal. He sent the pagoda towards Li Qie using his strongest technique. The pagoda wielded his supreme primordial Dao. Its power erupted and could erase all the sources of life during their infancy. Beyond immortal was a testament to its effectiveness. After all, an immortal was a mortal baby once, not something difficult to destroy. Boom! The crowd became aghast because they still felt the tower striking their very source. Although the others were suppressed, Li Qie simply raised his hand akin to someone raising a cup of tea in a graceful manner. His sleeve blotted out the sky and sealed all directions, preventing any forces from getting close to him. This included the primordial boosted pagoda from the Conqueror. Only Calamity Dao Lord could have stopped this attack, but Li Qie did so with his sleeve alone. He then swung his hand, for he needed nothing more to deal with these apex cultivators. They were no different than ants compared to his current self. He still seemed to be carefree despite facing attacks capable of destroying the upper continents if left unchecked. Boom! His sleeve sent out a devastating blast wave capable of flipping the world over. Every living being was swept off the ground, the birds and fish included. This emanated across all 6 continents. Everyone sensed this frightening instability. Naturally, Sword Sea, Supreme, Eternal, and Immortal Pagoda were sent flying as well. It took them tens of thousands of miles before stabilizing. Alas, their vitality and internal organs shook violently, causing them to vomit blood. Just a hand wave from Li Qie alone dispelled their attacks and forced them back. Chapter 5461, Despair. If audio player doesn't work, press stop then play button again. Chapter 5461, Despair. Although spectators and the combatants were prepared mentally for something like this to happen, they still became astounded. The 4 apex cultivators should have been unstoppable in the upper continents. Supreme swapped his void thrust into one filled with emotions and compassion, targeting beyond the physical realms. Immortal Pagoda unleashed his strongest attack with the help of his primordial fruit. Sword Sea's Dao was omnipresent and unblockable. Eternal had complete mastery over the temporal affinity. The 4 in combination could kill all things or Sword Queen. Alas, Li Qie easily sent them flying. They couldn't damage a hair of his. It seemed that he was merely swatting 4 mosquitoes, nothing more. The Dragon Lords and Emperors felt despair while watching this, let alone regular cultivators. The latter viewed apex cultivators as the peak of this world. They could try for a lifetime and never reach this level. Only a few chosen ones had the privilege to even attempt this feat now. Their power and prestige only served as decorations for Li Kai's frightening ability. What kind of existence was he, to defy reasons and logic? At the very least, there was a sliver of hope in catching up to Supreme. It might require an immense time but not impossible. As for Li Chia, they didn't even have a grasp on his true power. Even if they were at the apex, they still couldn't catch up to him. Nonetheless, some maintained an optimistic viewpoint. They were witnessing a being above the apex, meaning that a path was actually possible. Being a top conqueror was not the end of the road. Ha ha ha. The wounded Sword Sea laughed heartily and said, "There is no end to the Tao, it can fulfill all ambitions." He was proud of his oceanic slash but was swiftly defeated by Heart Blade. He thought that he wouldn't be able to surpass this achievement, nor could anyone else. Although Sword Queen and Supreme were incredible cultivators, they could only match him at best with regard to the Sword Tao. Alas, the moment he saw Li Kai's Heart Blade, he knew that he had lost. He finally caught a glimpse of the endless possibilities. N-0 VLB in his Tao came from finality, a legendary and peerless scripture. He couldn't surpass it, hence his sadness in feeling the limitation of his Tao. Today, Heartblade shattered his understanding of the Sword Tao and enlightened him. The previous duels with Supreme and Sword Queen did not have this effect since they were evenly matched. "Sir, please accept my gratitude for the lesson." The wounded Sword Sea lowered his head, unable to contain his excitement. Spectators became sentimental while watching the aftermath of the battle. Bottlenecks existed in all cultivation realms. Apex cultivators had an even harder time breaking through. They normally needed a supreme fortune or an opportunity. This applied to Sword Sea as well. Today, seeing Li Kai's Heart Blade was his God-sent opportunity. An eternity is still ephemeral in your eyes. Eternal Conqueror sighed and said, "I was displaying my slight skills before an expert and made a fool out of myself." With that, he turned toward the last-gen members of Divine Alliance and said, "I have tried my best earlier, my debt is now repaid. Gentlemen, goodbye now, I hope we will be able to meet again." He then bowed in Li Kai's direction before disappearing from sight, not caring about anyone else's opinion. Of course, no one outside of Li Chia could stop him anyway. He only worked for Divine Alliance to repay a debt. With that done, there was nothing keeping him here. Divine Alliance suffered heavy losses today, losing both Sword Sea and Eternal Conqueror. Chapter 54-62, The Tao's endless silence took over the battlefield after the defeat of 4 apex cultivators. Eternal departed, Sword Sea had no intention of continuing the fight. The race suffered a devastating blow, perhaps losing half of its firepower. If 4 couldn't beat Li Chia, how could 2 ever hope to do so? "Sir, I have nothing but admiration for your power." Supreme bowed and said, "The Tao is endless, certainly worthy of our pursuit." Immortal Pagoda showed no loss of morale after losing. Nothing seemed capable of breaking their spirit. As long as they were around, they would serve as pillars for the race. "The 2 of you must have entered Celestial Court and saw those geezers," Li Chia said with a smile. The 2 exchanged glances and took a deep breath. This was the highest of secrets, how did he know? Leaking certain secrets relating to Celestial Court was punishable by death. Some 12 Fruit members weren't privy to them either. No wonder why Supreme and Immortal Pagoda held such pivotal positions in the upper continents. This was especially true for Supreme. Putting strength aside, only those who have contributed and gained the trust of Celestial Court could gain insight into certain secrets. There must be mighty monsters in Celestial Court, a neutral Tao Lord said. In the past, his group had attempted to learn more information to no avail. "We were well liked, that's all," Supreme said. "I'm actually interested to see what they have given you, to have such confidence." Li Chia smiled, "If you 2 leave now, I will spare you. Otherwise, only death awaits. His declaration suffocated the listeners since no one doubted him right now. This could be Supreme and Immortal Pagoda's last day in this world. They themselves knew that Wuxia was not merely boasting. Nonetheless, Supreme maintained his initial stance. I will not abandon my duty. My apologies, sir. Very well, I will give you the chance to show me your true ace cards given by Celestial Court. This is not the time to hold back. Wuxia said. Sir, if you are willing, we can have a formal discussion. Immortal Pagoda was many things, prideful, arrogant, imperious. However, he was no idiot and understood that fighting Wuxia was rather unwise. You two are not qualified to negotiate with me. I am being awfully merciful and patient right now. Wuxia shook his head. It was either his way or death. This was already his being polite and patient as well. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda were unreachable for many others but unqualified when speaking to Wuxia. The current situation instilled despair into the members of Heaven and Divine Alliance. How could they ever hope to beat Wuxia? Sir, killing us changes nothing in the grand scheme of things. Supreme took a deep breath and said. Indeed, it changes nothing, but there is a start to everything. Since the two of you wish to toil for Celestial Court, I will start with you two, and it won't be longer until I finish off Celestial Court as well. At that point, the race and the people will only exist in the past. Wuxia said nonchalantly. Wuxia had mentioned this goal before, but now, it seemed to be concrete and coming along soon. Could he actually destroy Celestial Court? The duck egg buyer and many others have failed. Seems like we must fight. Supreme said solemnly. This won't be much of a fight. The destruction of Celestial Court shall start with your death. Wuxia smiled. I know we are overestimating ourselves, but let us witness your invincibility again, sir. Immortal Pagoda laughed. Show me what Celestial Court had invested for the two of you. Wuxia remarked. Chapter 5463, Scrap Metals from Celestial Court. Sir, we are ready for another lesson. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda exchanged glances before preparing for battle. Supreme stood with Heaven Alliance and Immortal Pagoda was with Divine Alliance. Gentlemen, are we as one? Supreme glanced at his fellow members. To the death. They shouted in unison. Yes, to the death. Supreme roared back in high morale. Please lend me a hand. Immortal Pagoda told the remnants of Divine Alliance. We shall do our best, Divine Alliance will never falter. Their morale seemed high as well after becoming a part of Celestial Court. Very well. Immortal Pagoda always looked magnificent whether in victory or defeat. His aura and presence didn't wane in the slightest. They once again focused on controlling the tower and the hook, shifting them away from the prisoners. All things and the others heaved a sigh of relief. They moved away from the battlefield instead of helping Wuxia since he didn't need them. Doing so might only annoy him. Sir, I'm afraid we will have to offend you. I hope you understand since this is a fight to the death. Supreme entered the formation controlling Celestial Tower. No need for apologies, I don't mind sending all of you to the next journey. Wuxia smiled. Well, get started then. Supreme understood how precarious this would be, but they were determined to continue. Kill. Immortal Pagoda controlled the hook with all of his power. Kill. The members from both alliances let out a rallying cry as well. Boom. The eruption of their power and vitality was a sight to behold. /P, just a single Conqueror alone could leave everyone breathless. All of them channeling at the same time stretched out the fabrics of space and reality. The tower became resplendent, its mere presence alone became unbearable for anyone beneath. No cultivators could stay alive while being targeted. The hook, on the other hand, lacked flashiness but made up for this in sharpness. Its glint alone could reap the lives of conquerors and Dao lords. The two artifacts reached their strongest state, capable of blowing through stars as if they were straw boats. Mortals and cultivators in the upper continents were paralyzed on the ground, lacking the strength and courage to face this terrifying disaster. They felt as if an apocalypse was incoming. Go! Supreme and Immortal Pagoda attacked Wuxia in unison. The tower was the first to fly toward his position. The space around him didn't just collapse but melted into nothingness. Being reduced to ashes and pieces still meant existing in some ways. This was a complete erasure of everything around him. The hook appeared at the same time, resembling the scythe of a death god, sharp enough to cut down top cultivators like tofu. Boom! Time came to a stop as Wuxia did the impossible, raising the tower with one hand and holding the hook with the other. OVLB1N spectators couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. He was using his bare hands to stop the empowered artifacts. Anyone else could have been obliterated and sliced to pieces by them, not Wuxia. Of course, they all knew how terrifying Wuxia was, but their jaw still dropped to the ground. All Things and Sword Queen couldn't have done this, not even the mighty Calamity Dao Lord. His shell couldn't have endured the onslaught. These pieces of scrap metals could have been effective in the past, but now, completely worthless in my eyes. Wuxia smiled and stunned his opponents. They were already giving their all, yet their ace cards meant nothing to Wuxia. Chapter 5464. Can't even be an appetizer if audio player doesn't work. Press stop then play button again. Chapter 5464. Can't even be an appetizer. Wuxia then raised one leg up. The stars and the world itself moved to his rhythm. It became the only thing that mattered in the universe. Nothing else had the same grip. Myriad laws and mysteries of the Tao became mere specks of dust before his foot, being lifted up as well. Spectators had the illusion that this was the foot of heaven and earth. Boom! He stomped at the suppressive momentum of the tower and hook. They were made from incredible metals and treasures, currently empowered by numerous capable cultivators. Their momentum empowered by the formations couldn't be underestimated. No single soul could muster this level of power. This was the pinnacle of teamwork and resources, the highest achievement of cultivation in the upper continents. LBNA multicolored radiance erupted as all of the power in the artifacts tried to stop him. The combined effort through many generations of heaven and divine alliance broke down in the blink of an eye. Everyone else in charge of the formation was smashed down to the ground as well, resulting in broken bones and heavy loss of blood. They felt as if they were ants being stomped down by a merciless human, unable to resist. They groaned in pain while enduring the pressure. Spectators from a distance trembled in horror. Although they were fortunate enough to not be the target of this cosmic force, they still ached all over and had a hard time breathing. Their legs buckled as they witnessed this spectacle. The momentums of the artifacts collapsed first, and so did their physical frame. The materials gifted by Celestial Court were all destroyed today. Celestial Tower allowed Heaven Alliance to dominate for eras. This only stopped when the people managed to build Haven Bulwark. Today, Wuxia brought an end to the tower. Supreme and the others eventually got up. The shift in pose caused them to vomit blood, but putting physical injuries aside, their confidence was shattered by the stomp as well. Everyone could tell that he would have no problem killing all of them in just a second. The disparity in power was insurmountable. How many Alliance members still had the courage to face him? Death didn't deter them at first. However, their Tao heart was crushed now, leaving them with nothing but despair. Struggling was useless. Their lifelong achievements with the Tao were not worth mentioning. All of their hard work became meaningless. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda turned pale. The two of them have dominated for so long and had entered Celestial Court before. Nonetheless, they were certain that Wuxia was the strongest existence they had seen thus far. Is this it? Not enough to be an appetizer, Wuxia said, pouring salt on the wounds of his opponents. Chapter 5465. Destined for greatness. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda felt their legs shaking, not out of fear but out of injuries from the stomp earlier. Their immortal shell was nearly destroyed despite possessing the full forces of the alliances. They exchanged glances and took a deep breath, gathering their vitality and confidence once more. They regained their proud stance, but the same couldn't be said about their allies. Some harbored wishes to retreat because this was a suicidal mission. They had dominated their entire life and never feared anyone. Fear was an emotion they once felt during their youth and cultivation journey. Eventually, they overcame it and reached the top of the world. Although they weren't as strong as Supreme and other apex cultivators, they believed that this was only temporary. As long as they could stay alive and maintain this road, they could be the last ones smiling. Such things happened repeatedly in history, the weak eventually catching up and surpassing stronger cultivators. Thus, fear wouldn't be the right word, only temporary apprehension. Unfortunately, this emotion resurfaced in their heart after being stomped by Wuxia. It crushed their confidence and Dao heart. They looked up and saw the immeasurable gap. They couldn't see the end of the Dao path while Wuxia was already standing there. This was a hopeless fight. Therefore, some among them wavered and wanted to escape. The solidarity had been shattered. Not long ago, they were willing to throw their lives away for their belief and mission. Now, the absolute zero chance of success made them abandon their conviction. This was the prelude to the collapse of the Dao heart and the start of their downfall. They understood the frightening consequences of this. They attempted to strengthen their Dao heart, summoning the courage to face Wuxia. Events flashed in their eyes in this split second, harking the early days of cultivation. When they were weak, they felt the same fear towards stronger cultivators. In the end, they eventually defeated these powerful foes and went farther and farther. This was a similar situation and they couldn't yield now. The first to stabilize were naturally Supreme and Immortal Pagoda. The former remained calm and collected while the latter was still the heaven's favorite. Conquerors and dragon lords couldn't afford to yield. Giving up meant weakening their Dao heart, something unbecoming of their status. Your perseverance is commendable. Wuxia praised the courageous foes. You have helped me understand my Dao heart more, sir. Supreme took a deep breath. You should be proud of your comprehension ability. Wuxia said. Well, I am certainly ready to die today for the sake of learning more about the Dao heart. Immortal Pagoda laughed and interjected. All things and the others had respect for their mortal foes. These two regained their composure and courage in such a short time despite facing Wuxia. Nonetheless, not all agreed with their readiness to die. What was the point of gaining a stronger Dao heart if it meant dying in battle today? However, Supreme and Immortal Pagoda appreciated maintaining their Dao heart. If they could somehow survive, they would be able to go farther than ever before. Plus, they had no regrets if they were to die during a battle. They didn't let down their past self by running away like a coward. This was absolutely the correct path for cultivators. Yes, cultivation is an internal journey, not for the sake of fame and authority nor incredible techniques. Wuxia nodded. Born in this world and destined for greatness, it's a shame that my mission collides with yours, sir. Immortal Pagoda laughed. Let us finish this, sir. Supreme said. They have chased fear away and readied themselves for the second round. Chapter 54-66, Primordial Dao Fruit. Everyone watched with bated breath, including the members of Divine and Heaven Alliance. They could no longer join this battle since this was beyond their level. Their ace cards included the Tower and the Hook from Celestial Court. Wuxia swiftly put an end to their artifacts. How could Supreme and Immortal Pagoda stop Wuxia? It didn't matter what they had hiding up their sleeves. Everything seemed rather futile now. This was the last struggle before death. Of course, their fearless determination earned them the respect of the spectators, friends and foes alike. This was especially true for the latter who had experienced the nightmarish defeat just now. Wuxia left a shadow of despair in their mind. Overcoming this in such a short time was far from easy. Have it your way. Wuxia said with a smile. Very well, it concludes today. Supreme smiled and said. Let us fight to the very last breath. Immortal Pagoda laughed and resumed his imperious demeanor. Start. Li Chia said, still looking like a mortal. Alas, everyone had to look up at him now as if he was a colossal giant, the ultimate existence of their world. He held the cosmos in his grasp and all living beings should be prostrating before him. I shall embarrass myself first. Immortal Pagoda soared upward after saying this, looking like a true dragon with an imperial aura. Others couldn't help but cheer for him. In a sense, his strong display was saving the face of conquerors. Everyone trembled before Li Chia earlier, feeling nothing but despair. They couldn't keep their head up while facing him, looking like stray dogs. This completely ruined the image of conquerors and dragon lords. However, Immortal Pagoda was still as proud as before, not looking dejected after losing. He was the embodiment of how a conqueror should be. Boom! He showed his 12 palaces again and the anima tree. Their power engulfed and illuminated the battlefield. His aura still left others breathless. He was weaker than Li Chia but stronger than virtually anyone else. His single Dao fruit emitted primordial rays that could only be seen at the start of the world. Primordial Dao laws mirroring the time of creation also descended. Space sank downward from the weight of his fruit, seemingly unable to accommodate its existence. For most cultivators, their anima tree garnered more attention due to its size and power. However, his impressive tree stood second to the unique fruit hanging on the tip of the tree. The primordial affinity of the fruit seemed to be one step above the anima affinity of the tree. Rumble. A maelstrom eventually formed around the primordial fruit, causing the crowd to gasp in astonishment. This legendary fruit deserved all of its wondrous tales. Chapter 54-67, Immortal from above. As the rotation of the spatial maelstrom intensified, it started pulling everything inside. The primordial fruit latched onto several things and pulled them out. Rumble. Loud detonations hurt the eardrums. Space and time crumbled as a result. After one final bang, 4 portals appeared behind Immortal Pagoda Conqueror. Unlike regular portals with small openings, they connected the 4 worlds to the battlefield. The first was a decrepit red sky engulfed by nefarious forces. Another had nothing but molten liquid surging chaotically along devastating flames. The third was inscrutable with runes and mysteries. The fourth was an empty expanse of the void. The Broken Realms. Everyone immediately recognized them: Evil Reborn, Red Flood, Ultimate, and Perish. Rumble. Loud explosions emanated from them as if certain things were awakening. They turned out to be pagodas instead of colossal monsters. A total of 4 appeared, 1 in each realm. Mark of the primordial fruit manifested onto the surface, activating the pagodas. Violent forces erupted in the 4 worlds as the pagodas turned into maelstrom as well, absorbing the powers around them. Is he trying to control the 4 broken realms? Spectators became startled and shuddered. Of course, they could also see that this was a premeditated plan, not something concocted out of thin air. The 4 pagodas inside the realms were made from priceless metals. Ordinary conquerors and Dao lords couldn't muster this many resources. Moreover, he imbued the mark of his primordial fruit on them as well. His fruit served as the very foundation for the pagodas to borrow the power of these broken realms, seemingly impossible to duplicate. This is above what Illumination Conqueror did. Someone commented. Illumination borrowed the power of the illusory realms, albeit only a small portion. Most crucially, he didn't do it alone, needing to rely on a sacrificial ceremony performed by his men. Therefore, Immortal Pagoda Conqueror was clearly one step higher in this regard. Can any other conqueror or Dao lord do something like this? Another couldn't help but praise. Depending on his mastery of this method, he could be virtually unbeatable among his peers. Several apex cultivators would need to band together against him. Thus, putting Li Chia aside, would he be the strongest cultivator right now in the upper continents? So he was holding back. One spectator commented. It was clear as day that Immortal Pagoda was still keeping this a secret until the last moment. Immortal from above. Supreme murmured. Boom. The sky shattered, leaving behind a massive hole with power oozing down like an ocean. The ocean of light immediately engulfed everyone, capable of reducing the battlefield to pieces. A majestic figure descended from the hole, looking like it was made from the purest stars. Its power was proportional to its gigantic frame. What is this thing? Everyone could tell that this wasn't a living being. Is it a metal giant? They thought about the giants back in Imperial Attendant City. Chapter 5468, Matchless Momentum. However, the metal giants back in Imperial Attendant weren't this big in size. Thus, they thought about the combined transformation summoned by Wuxia. Upon closer inspection, they weren't the same metal giants. The ones back in Imperial Attendant were clearly built by men. Of course, they had no other information about the method or actual material. On the other hand, this giant was made from the power of stars, not metals. It's a supreme momentum manifesting into a physical frame. A powerful dragon lord said. I see, others nearby responded. The question is, what is the source of this momentum? All Things Tao Lord carefully analyzed the giant. Others activated their heavenly gaze and couldn't find any energy channel empowering the giant. A while ago, they saw two formidable momentums from the tower and the hook. Their source came from a foundation embedded in heaven and divine alliance on top of the precious metals. However, the giant seemed different, whether it be its source or material composition. It's purposely hidden, not something that can be done in a day or two. A member of Divine Alliance said. For example, if they had wanted to hide the source of their hook, they could have done so. However, since building the momentum for the hook required numerous cultivators, there was no point in trying to hide an open secret. I didn't know we had something like this still. Another said. Members of Divine and Heaven Alliance were confused about this giant's existence. They should have caught some information about it prior. Supreme couldn't have been the only one working on this due to its scale. Celestial Court. All Things and his allies understood what was going on. They prepared many things on the upper continents and now, they trust Supreme enough with them. Principal Conqueror understood. Is this how they have absolute control over Heaven Alliance? A dragon lord shuddered. Celestial Court had hidden a grand momentum in the upper continent unbeknown to anyone. Only the loyal Supreme had access to it. Was it a way to prevent problems from Heaven Alliance in case of having traitors? Or was it to keep it an absolute secret from anyone, an ace card to be used during an existential crisis? The upper echelon from Heaven Alliance didn't feel great about it. They had been supporting Celestial Court and the race for so long. How could this be viewed as anything but a lack of trust? It was one thing to be skeptical of Divine Alliance. After all, they didn't necessarily support Celestial Court. Alas, Heaven Alliance had proven its loyalty over the eras. I think only Supreme and Immortal Pagoda knew about this. An emperor said, and only Supreme has control over it. The rumor is true. All Things gazed at the giant and said, they have so much confidence in Supreme. What can we do? He is actually from Celestial Court. This notion ran through the minds of Heaven Alliance's members. Supreme actually came from Celestial Court while others joined later. His background was as prestigious as can be. Of course, he became the leader of Heaven Alliance due to his own charisma and power. Nonetheless, some loyalists felt betrayed by this revelation. Celestial Court still viewed them as outsiders despite their contributions. Risking their lives in the past meant nothing. Boom! Meanwhile, Supreme leaped into the sky and entered the giant, assuming control. Chapter 5469, Skeletal Sword. Boom! Supreme took control of the mysterious momentum's power and channeled it into his body, making it his own. His new majestic force drowned the 9 heavens and 10 earths. This left the crowd speechless because this was one step above the tower and the hook. The latter required power stemming from a formation to reach their peak state. However, this momentum was powering Supreme instead, shrouding him with an ultimate armor set. Normally, armors were still external items with limitations. In this case, it became a part of his body. Its power could be used with full mastery. This was beyond the ability of anyone in the upper continent. All of the best cultivators could have worked together and still wouldn't be able to duplicate this momentum. It allowed the user to gain its full power without any backlash or complications. Boom! Spectators couldn't find words to describe the empowered Supreme. Perfection was the only thing on their mind, whether it be his appearance, aura, or Tao power. He was already an immaculate entity standing at the apex before this. This fusion boosted his power considerably, allowing him to wield the power of the entire upper continents. He became one with heaven and earth just like a true immortal. A while back, Eternal Conqueror displayed a time-worn aura. Supreme possessed something even greater at the moment. No wonder why Celestial Court didn't let anyone else know about this. One man alone can wield it. A spectator said. This giant momentum was entirely different from the tower and the hook. In fact, Supreme might have enough power right now to attack any location in the immortal content, Celestial Court included. This was the reason why they kept it a secret and only gave it to a trustworthy member. Sword, heed my call. Supreme uttered. Another sword came from above and all other swords suddenly lost their hum. What? Sword Sea, Sword Queen, and Darkfrost trembled after sensing this. Their swords became silent even before that sword could be seen clearly. Keep in mind that given their mastery of this Tao, their swords were also wondrous artifacts. They had been gestated by their owner's sword Tao, so being suppressed was an entirely new thing for them. Since even these apex swords were affected, no other blade in the entire world could make a sound now. Sword users could no longer unsheath their blades. Even if someone was strong enough to force the issue, their sword had lost the will to fight, becoming utterly useless. This was a testament to the might of the descending sword, something superior to the rest. Everyone took a closer look at the blade wielded by Supreme, a skeletal sword. Just looking at it froze spectators, leaving them breathless. They suddenly saw a terrible scene, the blade floating in an ancient epoch while consuming all the bones of that period's inhabitants. Billions and billions of creatures including true dragons, phoenixes, gods, and cultivators. They once were the lords of the epoch only to be reaped in the end. Their true bones, blood, and lives were all devoured for the creation of this skeletal sword. After all the living beings were gone, the land itself was refined and robbed of its essences, all for the sake of creating an epoch-level weapon. Chapter 5470, Sir, can you stop the force of an epoch? Holding the sword in his grasp was akin to holding an entire epoch. The world trembled before its emergence, let alone its inhabitants. Apex cultivators couldn't hold the sword, but Supreme was able to do so due to his current empowered state. The mysterious momentum seemingly possessed endless power. Perhaps it was blessed by a supreme existence previously. Everyone gasped at this sight. All things and his peers understood that their current selves wouldn't be able to control this sword. If they were to forcefully hold this sword, their body would instantly crumble despite possessing an immortal shell. The rumor is true, Celestial Court does have this sword, a paragon artifact from an old epoch. An emperor from Heaven Alliance murmured. I can't believe it, they left a paragon artifact down here? A monarch didn't understand the reason why. Some of the top cultivators have heard rumors of Celestial Court possessing a paragon artifact. However, no one could actually wield it, hence its disappearance in history. In theory, it should be well guarded in Celestial Court. Just how much trust did Celestial Court have in Supreme? It's to kill an overlord. An ancient emperor speculated. Wait, the existence of this sword is a sin, that's why it couldn't be left behind in Celestial Court or it would have been taken away. A conqueror heard something like this before. Not necessarily, maybe Supreme is granted the sword for a battle, he'll have to return it later. Another came up with a different theory. Regardless of the actual answer, this showed just how much trust Celestial Court had in Supreme. Heaven Burial Conqueror and the lords during time immemorial might not had this privilege. After all, a paragon artifact was an actual threat to Celestial Court. Its power could cut through the barriers and formations. Sword Emperor who had toiled for Celestial Court for eras didn't have access to it either. Perhaps only Light Dragon Conqueror was equal to Supreme in this regard. Now, everyone understood the reason for the supreme momentum hidden in the upper continents. It was so that someone could obtain this incredible shell for the sake of controlling the Paragon sword. The user would be able to easily dominate the upper continents, hence Celestial Court's careful selection of Supreme. If Supreme harbored any intention of betraying them, they would lose control over the upper continents since anyone sent down would be swiftly killed. This was similar to what Eternal Conqueror did in the lower continents. What do you two think? Can you wield the sword? Sword C asked Darkfrost and Sword Queen. Sword Queen didn't respond while Darkfrost put on a serious expression before replying, "If I muster all of my strength, maybe I can swing it twice, but most likely once. Same for me, holding it alone will destroy my body." Sword C agreed after assessing the power within the skeletal sword. "Sir, please give me pointers." Supreme looked invincible at this moment since he could defeat all the Apex cultivators together. Li Chia seemed amused to see the sword and said, "True Bones, finally showing up again. Looks like your Celestial Court has a capable ally, to be able to come up with this wielding method. They didn't forge it and must have needed to use a borrowed shell in the past. Incredible insight, so you are familiar with it, sir." Supreme praised. True Bones? Everyone repeated the name of this Paragon artifact. It was forged by a monstrous overlord after sacrificing their epic, a truly dreadful tale. Celestial Court eventually found it, but no one there could actually use it. Their ultimate masters couldn't show their faces to the world. Thus, they had to take over a mighty cultivator's body to wield the sword temporarily. Of course, this had serious consequences for the unlucky cultivator chosen to be taken over. Because of this, they rarely used it in history until an unknown guest came along. This person had vast knowledge of True Bones and came up with the current method to wield it. "Do you think that this is enough to kill me?" Li Chia smiled. "Sir, can you stop an attack with the force of an epic?" Supreme asked with a serious expression. The crowd wondered as well. No Apex cultivator would be able to survive a swing from this sword, but what about Li Chia? He might be the only one capable of this feat. Chapter 5471, Celestial Court's Three Immortals. I'm rather curious, who is your master in Celestial Court? Li Chia smirked while asking. None expected him to shift the conversation. Strangely enough, his closest allies didn't know the answer either. His background was a mystery. Some believed that he came from Celestial Court, but his allies didn't think so. He was born in the upper continents as far as they knew. The journey remained unknown, but he eventually made it to Celestial Court at a young age. Another popular speculation included his being born in Celestial Court but was sent down to the upper continents for training. Li Chia's question piqued everyone's interest. Who was his master? I am just a junior fortunate enough to earn the love of the seniors in Celestial Court. Supreme humbly answered. Li Chia shook his head and said, "You're not fooling anyone. Nether Emperor and the likes are not worthy to be your master. His disciple wouldn't be as trusted, in fact, he himself wouldn't be given True Bones and this supreme momentum. Senior Nether was once the Lord of Celestial Court, a true paragon." Supreme didn't answer directly. Nether Emperor was an unfamiliar name now, only the oldest emperors and monarchs knew of him. The current lord was Sword Emperor, Nether was his predecessor. Sword Emperor was a rising star and contributed greatly during immemorial epic war. Nether abdicated afterward and gave his role to Sword. Sword's success also incited criticism and ridicule in secrecy. The reason was rather simple, his background. 142, 93. 60, 102 Back during time immemorial, the Qian were branded as sinners by Celestial Court. Thus, they retaliated and led the people against the oppressors. Among their 9 heavenly emperors, they had the unbeatable World Emperor and the brilliant Sword Emperor. All Things shook his head, unaware of the answer since he wasn't involved in the war back then. The old geezer has legends too, but I think only 2 people have seen him before. Sword Si Dao Lord joined in. Who are the 2? Yi Fantian asked curiously. Jiao Heng and Duality Master. Jiao Heng's visit was too long ago for the details to be known, but Duality Master had visited. Rumor has it they even shared a drink together. Sword Si said. How strong is this cultivator? Yi Fantian asked again. I do not know. From pieces here and there is a chance that he was the founder of Celestial Court. Of course, I have no solid evidence. The founder of Celestial Court. Yi Fantian was shaken since one could imagine his power after hearing this. How could he still be alive? Is this duty or just being a cannon fodder? Li Qiye smiled while staring at Supreme. A great favor must be repaid by loyalty. Supreme said, Sir, you must step over my body first if you wish to destroy Celestial Court. My bones shall be the first step of your path. You have good self-awareness among many other things, all valuable characteristics. Li Qiye clapped and said, Fine, put down true bones and you may leave this place unscathed. Everyone took a deep breath. Someone of Li Qiye's level didn't need to bluster. Was he confident in defeating True Bones and killing Supreme? They glanced at Supreme. Would he continue in spite of the odds? I am grateful for your affection, sir. But, my devotion isn't mere empty words. Supreme shook his head. Chapter 5472, Lord of the World. Very well, shall we get started? Li Qiye asked with a smile. Sir, we await your guidance. Immortal Pagoda Conqueror said before gathering his power. He had the might of the 4 broken realms behind him, channeling their forces through the 4 pagodas. They empowered his primordial fruit, turning him into a gigantic lord wielding 4 different forces. Each of his breaths could release this power, easily destroying a continent or killing a top cultivator. Although he was already stronger than virtually anyone prior to this, his power surged to an unsurpassable level. The heavens' favorite. Any spectator would have this notion in their mind. Now, his prophecy of being the greatest was being fulfilled. 142, 93. 60, 102. This was different from Supreme's form as well. The latter was given to him by Celestial Court while Immortal Pagoda most likely prepared the pagodas in the 4 realms himself. Come. Li Qiye smiled and waited for the enemies to attack first. Everyone understood that Supreme and Immortal Pagoda Conqueror were the true lords of the upper continents since they had access to these ace cards. They simply kept it hidden for a multitude of reasons. Alas, Li Qiye has forced them to show their hands, pushing them to the edge of despair. Li Qiye smiled and became resplendent with an immortal light. Each of his movements was accompanied by the Grand Tao and all the laws of this world. Although he still didn't activate his aura and cultivation, everything within the 6 continents bent to his will. His fusion with the world calmed everyone down instantly. The apocalyptic dread from the 2 attacks suddenly vanished. As long as he stood at the forefront, the forces of destruction wouldn't be able to get past his mastery of the Grand Tao and all other affinities. Other self-proclaimed lords in the 6 continents were mere pretenders, unable to reach the apex. The supreme forces of the 2 attacks suddenly exploded the moment he raised his hands. They caused devastating damage to the battlefield but didn't hurt him at all. He stopped the skeletal swords with 2 fingers, reserving his palm for the Immortal Pagoda. This scene left spectators breathless. Chapter 5473, A certain someone. The insurmountable odds didn't apply to Li Qiye. Although the crowd was shocked by the grand spectacle, they didn't find the result surprising. They felt something about his current state, that he was one with the world. No, he was the high heaven itself. The high heaven was a concept beyond their grasp, unimaginable and unfathomable. Nonetheless, they could tell that this entity was true, evident by the terrifying tribulations. Wuxia was just as unstoppable as the heavenly tribulations. The skeletal sword and the combined might of the four broken realms were overwhelming, just not when the target was Wuxia. He was one with heaven and earth. Everything else could be destroyed and he would still exist. Some insightful cultivators gained a new understanding of anima and the true self. Was this the highest level? Anima, seeing the high heaven at the end of the path, one of them murmured. Prior to this, they had a vague idea of the end of the path after cultivating anima. Alas, something flashed in their mind after seeing Wuxia's current state. Done. Me, seeing the high heaven, the empowered supreme and immortal pagoda became emotional as well, reaching the point of being enlightened. Could this be the final destination of their path, the end of the Tao? One could now hear lightning crackles and thunderous explosions above Wuxia as if a tribulation was forming. This only lasted for a few seconds before receding. A valiant woman in the upper continent looked up and saw Wuxia's current state, murmuring, "Is it necessary to display the high heaven's appearance when garnering this little power? Show off." Meanwhile, Wuxia prevented the sword and the pagoda from moving an inch. Supreme and immortal pagoda could see that this was futile. "Senior, lend me a hand." Immortal pagoda shouted to everyone's astonishment. Who in the upper continents was qualified to help him now, given his empowered state? Moreover, Senior? Celestial Court, descend. Supreme shouted as well. Everyone became tense and felt something ominous was unraveling. A figure appeared in the deepest region of Ultimate, a place known by cultivators yet unexplorable. The Tao profundity there was beyond the reach of apex cultivators. Space and time morphed chaotically around him, unable to maintain their original form. This caused him to be ethereal like a shadow. Nonetheless, they felt that he had understood all the mysteries and truths. No secrets in this world remained for him. Boom! He raised one hand and took control of the four broken realms, activating the final radiance of a setting sun and extracting all of their power. Rumble. The upper continents couldn't contain such a frightening force and started expanding violently. Storms and gales manifested into reality, ravaging the continents. Profound Emperor. An ancient Grand Emperor saw him and gasped. Profound Emperor? This was a nearly forgotten title, an immemorial being who was the founder of Divine Alliance. In the distant epoch, only a few cultivators could be considered his equals, the most notable being Purewood Divine Emperor and World Emperor. He disappeared not long after starting Divine Alliance. People speculated that he had chosen to live reclusively in Celestial Court or passed away from old age. None expected to see him in Ultimate. Some have gone there before without knowing that it was his abode. Chapter 5474, Secret of the Momentum. His appearance shocked all the spectators, causing them to gasp. During immemorial epoch war, he stood equal to Crimson Emperor of Celestial Court and Immortal Monarch Yi of Immortal Tao City. Crimson fell in the battle while the monarch no longer appeared in public. Today, Profound was finally seen again. Boom! At the same time, a primordial light descended, one that could only be seen during the start of time. The image of Celestial Court manifested into reality, prompting others to kneel on the ground. However, the most frightening aspect was the bright stars rotating around the court while exuding an unrecognizable power. What is this affinity? Others haven't seen this type of power before. A monarch became overwhelmed with emotions and shouted, "It's from a heavenly treasure, he's borrowing its power." Sure enough, this unknown affinity eventually attached itself and blessed Supreme. Clank. True Bones was finally able to display its true power. Done. May a terrible phenomenon emerged behind the sword, skeletons belonging to true dragons, the strongest monarchs, Tao ancestors, the strongest beings of an epoch were robbed of their bones and vitality, all for the sake of creating true bones. With the help of an unknown heavenly treasure, Supreme gained the force of an overlord capable of using true bones to its fullest potential. While everyone thought Celestial Court was on the verge of descending, a golden river shockingly appeared with the yin and yang separated. Activate! Someone shouted and destroyed the visual phenomenon, revealing a hidden peak. This was hidden by a supreme method, but when the image of the court appeared, the stealth method was at its weakest. The attacker was none other than an immortal emperor, a middle-aged man wearing a yellow outfit with a hat, looking like a laborer. Immortal Emperor Mingdu. Everyone was surprised to see him floating in space near the mysterious peak. Was he not a member of Heaven Alliance? Why did he interfere with Supreme Summon? As a senior member of Heaven Alliance, he was tasked with defending it during the war. Otherwise, the people might take advantage of their absence and attack their home. Boom! He destroyed the peak as well, revealing another hidden entity, a giant made from peerless metals. It slightly resembled the metal giants from Imperial Attendant City but was fundamentally different. He then tore the giant apart, exposing the dimension inside. It was nothing more than a shell to hide strange effigies within. No, these were living people lying on circular slabs positioned on top of a Tao altar. The entire platform was inscribed with mysterious runes, channeling energy from living beings and using them as batteries for the sake of activating momentum. The internal hull of the giant had countless Tao stones and refined jades, all part of a supreme momentum's framework. So this is the source of the supreme momentum. An emperor took a deep breath. Putting the immense resources aside, they used living cultivators as fuel for the momentum. They're ancient emperors and monarchs. Someone recognized these cultivators stuck in stasis. That's Qian Dao Heaven Emperor. Didn't all of them die back then? A grand emperor from the Heaven race recognized the founder of the Qian. Qian Dao Heaven Emperor was rumored to be the second grand emperor after Purewood Divine Emperor. Rumor has it that every top member of the Qian was killed with the exception of Sword Emperor. Look over there, majestic emperor of the diviners. A different monarch saw another person and whispered, he betrayed Celestial Court during immemorial epic war. The living batteries included members from both the people and the race. Their descendants thought that they had fallen during immemorial epic war. As for Li Chia, he focused on a woman who was sealed as well. She still looked young and wore a gray dress, nothing more. Her simplicity was unique in that it made everything else seem superfluous. She was a deadly weapon, devoid of unnecessary components. Chapter 5475, Heaven Razor. The woman was beautiful with gentle features and porcelain skin. Her eyes remained open in her frozen state, looking like jewels. Her figure was just as immaculate, slender yet curvy in the right places. A golden ribbon was tied around her waist and accentuated her alluring curves. Unfortunately, most would avert their gaze due to her intense murderous aura. It took the form of flames around her, causing others to back away. She seemed to be the king of all assassins, but alas, she was still captured and being used as a battery like the rest. Li Chia's eyes flashed menacingly after seeing her. Everyone else was shocked as well to see the cultivators hidden behind the source of the supreme momentum. Some of these prisoners were ancient beings that once dominated their eras. Supreme was certainly not the person who came up with this. He was yet to be born during their era. The only answer was Celestial Court. Even members of Heaven Alliance shuddered after seeing this revelation. Perhaps one day, they would be sacrificed as well if Celestial Court deemed it necessary. No wonder why this had to be kept a secret. A monarch said with a solemn tone. Outside of strategic reasons, they had no choice but to keep this a secret. Otherwise, they risk the animosity of both the race and the people. Some might start leaving Heaven Alliance as a result. No one would find out without Immortal Emperor Mingdu's interference. A Tao Lord said. Done. This was no coincidence. The source would still have been hidden behind the gigantic shell if it wasn't for Mingdu's attack. He waited for this exact moment to show the world what Celestial Court had been hiding. Boom. Profound Emperor channeled enough power in the four broken realms, clearly having more mastery in this process than Immortal Pagoda Conqueror. Clank. Meanwhile, the supreme momentum still powered True Bones, preparing for another assault. However, something massive flew out of Ultiant, the same entity that had escaped from Lesser Firmament. This time around, a primordial radiance ignited and chased away the fog shrouding the entity. This revealed a middle-aged man. A dark wound on his chest started closing as well. 3 souls as one. He roared thunderously. Inside Lesser Firmament, the man wearing Moon Embrace lost control of his body and started flying toward the horizon. As for Firmament Godchild, who had gotten far away, he was still lifted off the ground. He shouted, "Damn it all, I just want to be free, why is this happening to me? I don't want to shoulder the heaven anymore. Not like this." Unfortunately, his complaints fell on deaf ears. He was still dragged in the direction of Ultimate. It only took a second for the two to arrive and combine together with the recently recovered man. The 3 souls became one again. Boom! An eruption of light temporarily blinded everyone. Once it dispersed, everyone could see the man clearly, someone capable of shouldering the high heaven. The gods and emperors paid tribute to his greatness, the myriad Tao paled in comparison. One step of his could cause the celestials to rain from the sky. He could overturn the ages with a mere gesture, a truly unbeatable being. Profound Emperor's expression soured after seeing him. World Emperor of the Qian. Many ancient emperors and monarchs couldn't believe their own eyes. That's World Emperor? Others had heard of his legends before. He stood at the apex during time immemorial and even the previous epoch. Rumor has it that he was the lord of all 3 races, even going as far as reigning over Celestial Court. The Qian certainly dominated with their 9 emperors. However, he was still the most important factor. Even the arrogant Crimson Emperor couldn't defeat him in combat. He was the first to stand against Celestial Court's judgment against the people, leading his clan against tyranny. Unfortunately, Sword Emperor betrayed him, and in just one night, his clan disappeared from the world. His tragic fate made countless people sigh with regret over the years. Today, it looked like he had escaped with severe injuries. Some of his clan members were still alive, albeit being used as living batteries for Celestial Court. With his injuries healed and his souls as one, he awed the world with his presence once more. Nostalgia swept through the old cultivators near the battlefield. Can Profound Emperor stop him? They could tell that a battle between these two was inevitable, both top-tier members of the 3 races. Chapter 5476. My mission is over, boom. World Emperor activated his immortal armament for a direct attack on Profound Emperor. The immense distance between them meant nothing as a torrent of power soared forward. Profound no longer had time to help Immortal Pagoda, needing to use his Tao to stop World Emperor. They turned all of Ultimate into a battlefield. Time to end this. Li Qia leaped into the air, still accompanied by the myriad Tao since he was the paragon of this world. Whoosh! He swung his hand like an axe, no longer holding back. Supreme's True Bones and Immortal Pagoda's empowered state were certainly strong. Alas, they couldn't stop an attack from the high heaven. He destroyed Supreme's momentum and crushed the power channels from the 4 broken realms. His aura affected Ultimate, dispelling all the Tao there. This caused Profound Emperor to spit out a mouthful of blood. Done. Meihei understood the gravity of the situation and immediately fled for his life, running through a portal prepared deeper inside Ultimate. World immediately gave chase and disappeared as well. Ah! Supreme couldn't withstand the blow without the supreme momentum. His sacred fruits and tree disintegrated instantly. Immortal Pagoda didn't fare any better. His supreme Tao and everything else were destroyed with the exception of his primordial fruit, purposely left intact by Li Qia. Silence returned to the scene after Li Qia obliterated his opponents. The phenomenon of Celestial Court and the pulsing power of the unknown heavenly treasure were eradicated as well. The chop earlier by Li Qia seemed akin to a blow from the high heaven, fully suppressing powerful cultivators and mortals. You are unbeatable, sir. My mission is over, Supreme uttered his last words before turning stiff and dead. Ha ha ha, I witnessed invincibility, no regrets. Immortal Pagoda laughed as well before coughing out blood. His legs kicked out one last time before following Supreme to the grave. The crowd needed a moment to digest the death of these two apex cultivators. Both were destined for greatness, and sure enough, they lived up to everyone's expectations. They still deserved respect despite dying to Li Chia today. The two carried out their duty and died valiantly in battle. Their era was now over, ended by Li Chia, who didn't need to resort to using a weapon. Everyone trembled after recalling how easy it was for Li Chia. What a shame, they were brilliant. Someone commented while watching Li Chia taking away true bones and the primordial Dao fruit. Emperor, you are invincible. A monarch bowed in Li Chia's direction. Others regained their wits and also bowed, realizing that this was a being far beyond their reach. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda could have massacred all of them earlier, yet they couldn't last a single move against Li Chia. This battle ended in no time at all. Since Li Chia showed no intention of pursuing the issue, members of Heaven Alliance quietly retreated after Supreme's death. To try rising up against Li Chia was a suicidal endeavor. Having the number advantage didn't matter in the slightest. From now on, Heaven Alliance will only exist on paper. All Things and his allies heaved a sigh of relief. Heaven Alliance had all but disbanded. Divine Alliance wasn't in a better state either. Their mission of protecting the people was finished and they could focus on cultivation again. There was no need to act as protectors any longer. Peace at last? Mortals back in the upper continents couldn't witness the fight and the splendor of the emperors. Nonetheless, the pressure was now gone and they could finally stand up again. Warm sunlight returned and made them feel lucky to be alive. Some thought that perhaps it would be better for the world if there were no emperors and gods, for they were potential sources of calamity. They have heard legends about emperor wars before. Nearly experiencing a second one made them pray for a swift end to any conflict. Chapter 5477. Fortune. The crowd stared at Li Chia as if he was the high heaven itself. Jilin, Buddhist emperor and Azure ancestor, took their men closer for an official audience. If it wasn't for their ancestors, they wouldn't have been qualified to pay their respect to Li Chia. This was akin to mortals and regular cultivators wanting to have an audience with a Dao Lord, just simply impossible. My lord. Principal Conqueror kneeled before Li Chia along with his descendants. Li Chia had visited the Lu in the past. Alas, he had no ties with them now outside of Principal being wise enough to serve him. Li Chia glanced at them and said, I shall be leaving soon, and given our fateful connection, you may ask for a fortune. Everyone listened attentively and became envious of the Lu. Although top cultivators didn't necessarily need anything, their sect and clan certainly needed help. To have a fortune from Li Kai meant that their descendants could prosper for eras to come. Everyone else desired a favor from the conquerors, while the conquerors wanted nothing more than to be granted a wish by Li Chia. You are too kind, my lord. Principal said, but the Lu has already received your grace in the past, and further greed will only birth complacency and pride. We ask for nothing more. This surprised many top cultivators nearby. This was a once-in-lifetime opportunity, yet Principal politely refused. However, after thinking it through, some thought that this was a reasonable decision. The Lu was already strong enough with ample resources. Their descendants were blessed at birth. Done. Future prosperity depended on their descendants' efforts and had nothing to do with Principal. That is fine. Li Chia nodded. Humility is a virtue that can grant stability and peace. We will not let you down, my lord. Principal bowed again with his descendants. He knew that this might be their last meeting because Li Chia wouldn't just stop at the immortal continent. He would soar to a place unreachable by the likes of them. Li Chia nodded approvingly before gesturing for Li Zhitian to come closer. The latter obeyed and brought his fellow clan members over as well. In reality, they were in a tough position. The imperial clan was a part of Celestial Court and had been a pillar for Heaven Alliance. Li Qie had stated his goal of attacking Celestial Court, meaning that he would be fighting their ancestors eventually. Therefore, Li Zhitian had no reason or qualifications to see Li Qie. Nonetheless, he was summoned and respectfully accepted the call. Li Qie smiled at him and said, "You have an open mind and an open heart, you do not discriminate between the race or the people. Are you aware of your duties now?" "Young noble, that will be my life goal. I will guarantee peace and never show bias between the two sides. I will not let you down." Li Zhitian understood and kneeled. Li Qie handed him the primordial fruit and said, "Let us see what you can accomplish then." "I humbly accept." Zhitian accepted the primordial fruit. All eyes were on him. Most couldn't use the primordial fruit since they had their own Dao fruits. This didn't mean that the fruit was useless outside of cultivation. The primordial fruit was gained through cultivation or fortune. No one else had access to one otherwise. Since Li Zhitian had one outside of this, it implied that the imperial clan would have a primordial fruit user in the future, an existence comparable to Immortal Pagoda Conqueror or their ancestors, Crimson Emperor and Titanic Conqueror. The group paid respect one more time before leaving. "Benefactor, will you visit Azure Peak again?" Azure Ancestor bowed, aware of how fleeting this moment was. She was different from the others, possessing a special bond with Li Qie. He was there to protect her during the moment of her birth and could be considered her father. "I'm afraid not." Li Qie smiled and shook his head. He then gestured for Li Xiener to come over. "She'll stay in Azure Peak, she will do great things in the future and it is mutually beneficial," Li Qie said. Both didn't have a problem with this. Li Xiener had no home to speak of, so Li Qie purposely set up Azure Peak as a new home for her. This would pave a stable path for her future, not letting her fall into the darkness. The two women bowed one more time and retreated to the side. Li Qie turned his attention toward Yi Fantian and said, "You may tag along with me to train for a bit." This shocked everyone in the audience. By this point, Li Qie's superiority was apparent to all. They thought that he was the embodiment of the high heaven. Apex cultivators were mere insects compared to him. Thus, this invitation took them by surprise. Chapter 5478, Gentle Breezes. Yi Fantian became the center of attention since she had just been offered the ultimate fortune. Her future had limitless potential if she were to accept. She was already brilliant for cultivating 12 Dao fruits at the same time, something that had only been done by Light Dragon and Demon Conqueror. By choosing to follow Li Qie, she would undoubtedly exceed her predecessors. Yi Fantian glanced back at Sword Sea Dao Lord. Although she had left Divine Alliance, she still didn't forget about her roots. "Go, I have nothing more to teach you on this path." Sword Sea was excited for her and said, "I'll be in isolated cultivation after this for who knows how many years." Being taught by the young noble is a supreme fortune. He was her unofficial master, but now, she had carved her own path after possessing 12 Dao fruits. He didn't have much to teach her any longer and supported Li Qie's decision. She kneeled before Sword Sea and performed a full rite while speaking. "It was a blessing of 3 lifetimes to have you as a master. Please accept." With that, she kowtowed 9 times. Everyone understood that she might not return to see Sword Sea again, unable to repay his kindness. This gesture was warranted, so Sword Sea didn't stop her. After finishing, she stood up and bowed to those standing behind Swordia. "Seniors, I will not forget your kindness." They had helped with her training and even protected her. "The Tao is endless, but you all will go far." Li Qie then turned toward All Things and his allies. They didn't have a strong connection with Li Qie, so they didn't kneel. All Things was the most polite out of them and bowed. "We will cherish your advice, young noble, and will not stop progressing." Li Qie nodded and didn't say anything else. "Will we meet again?" Xiao Hu ran to the front and looked up at him. "Done." Li Qie gently stroked his head and smiled. "That depends on your future accomplishments." "I will try my best." The youth clenched his fists and declared before running back to Hallow Dao Lord. I should pay Pure Land a visit. Li Qie said. I'll accompany you, young noble. Jilin Buddhist Emperor said softly, not expecting to see him again after an epoch of time. Return first and wait. Li Qie said before gazing into the distance where someone was waving at him. We will be waiting, young noble. She bowed. Li Qie nodded and floated up into the air, eventually disappearing into the horizon. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief after his departure. The battle today was unforgettable even to the battle-hardened veterans since it changed the direction of the upper continents. Li Qie left an indelible mark in their memories. They thought that they had gone far enough on the Dao path. Alas, witnessing his power made them wonder whether they had even started cultivating. There was much work to be done, but at the very least, the possibilities of the Dao were clearly endless. An ancient pine coiled like a dragon above a divine peak. The latter towered over the landscape but still seemed tiny compared to the tree. A woman perched on top of one of its branches, kicking her legs back and forth. She wore a white robe with her hair tied up in a bun, looking like a man at first sight. Her appearance could only be described as average. Nonetheless, she had no dead angle and one could never get tired of looking at her. Ordinary yet remarkably captivating, words couldn't describe the juxtaposition. She had drunk with Li Qie previously and now, he joined her again on the tree branch. Gentle breezes caused the pine needles to sway softly and rustle like the waves of the ocean. The world could be seen in its entirety before them. She glanced at Li Qie and asked, So? Did you feel cool playing the high heaven? She paused for a moment and had a faint smirk. Being the high heaven feels pretty good, right? How pointless, just another repetition. What I seek is not to replace but rather, an answer. He shook his head in response. Why not ask me? She smiled playfully but her suggestion contained strong implications. Even if I were to ask you, you don't know the answer, it is the same yet not. He said. Oh. So you've figured it out. She smiled. What I saw before wasn't like this. He said, I didn't recognize it then. Because I defeated you so thoroughly. She said before pausing for a bit, yes, the same yet not, but in the end, the same origin. Indeed. He admitted, from what I can tell, this impossible matter has precedence. It's different this time, mission-wise. She shook his head. Why does it come? He stared at her and asked. She cast a glance at the horizon and didn't answer. It seemed that all living beings and the lands were within her sight. After a brief pause, she said slowly, This world is truly beautiful. There are some ugly aspects but yes, it is beautiful indeed. He nodded. Chapter 5479, Absolute Dominance. The woman took her time sensing the unique auras of the world. After a while, she opened her eyes and said, How wonderful, really a cause for hesitation. Hesitation doesn't save it from being reduced to ashes. Li Qie smiled. You're ruining the mood. She said angrily. We both know what will happen. Li Qie shrugged. I am not the one responsible. She tilted her head and said. Then who is responsible? My epoch is nearly at its prime, the inevitable is coming. Li Qie said. Yes. She pondered for a moment and admitted, the path that you're on will actually hasten it. That's not surprising. Li Qie said, so it won't be you. Everyone has their own karma and body, the same for me. She shook her head. Then perhaps it is time for a change, a new body. Li Qie said. True, that body has been gone for a long time. She said. It's rather commendable. Entering and learning the world, growing to love it, enduring hardships without any regret. Li Qie said. Trying to persuade me? She uttered coldly. That's useless. You are not stronger than the other body, there is nothing you can do for me even if you stay here. he said, looking down on me. She glared at him. Perhaps the beating last time was insufficient, not taking me seriously anymore after barely surviving. Of course not. He shrugged. You are perfection across the ages, transcending and ever transforming, neither male nor female nor anything else. Is that an insult? She seemed eager to beat Wuxia down. Her eyes flashed menacingly. I'm merely speaking the truth. You didn't look like this the last time we met. Plus, male or female, there's no difference at all to you since you are beyond such definition. He said. Whatever. The woman scoffed. He is him and I am me. He has his own karma and so do I. A single wish can change all of this. The karmic ties of the world do not bind you. You have a separate karmic system altogether just like him. Everything can be resolved. He said. Your attempt at creating a rift between us is useless. The woman said, we have the same source so it's idiotic that you're even trying. Is that so? Under the previous circumstances, sure, but what about now? If I remember correctly, a different body does not think so. He said. So what? Born from 100 deaths, but it's all fleeting, just merely surviving in this world. She said. Isn't that enough? Having fought countless emperors alone and sweeping through the continents. He said. That's just strutting around in an anthill, not worth mentioning. The past body could have destroyed numerous epochs with a single wave. She said with disdain. You're not wrong, it's definitely not on the same scale. He paused for a bit and said, however, that ants certainly enjoyed their time and life. Only by actually experiencing life would one be able to learn of its joys. Am I not a living being right now? She said. You are alive, not a rock, but you have too much awareness of your own. You're not settling in, choosing to observe the world instead of actually experiencing the joy of life. He said. Don't forget about the suffering. She snorted. As long as there are living beings, there will be joy and suffering. He nodded. No need to persuade me. She shook her head. He is deeply infected by the mortal coil, not I. I do not have such karma and need not such karma. Yes, your karma originated from a single thought and source. He said. If I were you, I would think more about how to escape or your preference of how to die. She suggested. I'm afraid I haven't thought of either. He smiled. I suppose your confidence is still intact despite running with your tail between your legs back then. She snorted. Let's not dwell on the past and plus, I consider it a victory since you couldn't kill me. He smiled. We'll get another opportunity soon enough. She sneered. That day will come, but you probably won't remember what you have said today. He said flatly. This world is ephemeral, nothing more than a passing cloud. Dissipating is inevitable, no need to leave traces. She said. This is your karma and your meaning of existence? He asked. Skip this nonsense. Everything is possible, my body can be his or that body, and the three can be united as one again. I think it's impossible to have three bodies now. He smiled. Not right now but in the future, the near future. She pondered for a moment before responding seriously. Wuxia's expression changed as well. He nodded in agreement. Yes, that body will definitely appear. And that is when your epoch shall be destroyed. She tapped his shoulder and said, see, I'm nice enough to give you a heads up so you can prepare in advance lest be caught off guard. How can I ever repay you? He joked. Do you actually want to repay me? She asked. No, only if you stay. How can I repay someone who won't be here? He waved his hand. Always scheming. She sneered. How am I scheming when it is entirely up to your desire? He disagreed. It's not possible. My body is incomparable to his, you have an immovable Tao heart, I have an immovable body. You have no control over it. She said. Yes, I am powerless here indeed. He nodded. Just accept reality, death will come knocking. She said. Death, to me, is also joy, a sweet release. He earnestly said. What if death avoids you? She stared straight at him. He understood the implication and let a sigh before replying. It's inevitable, each has their own destiny. 1. I could use the word avatar here, but it's not quite that word. That would be an interpretation, so once there is more context, I might start using avatar instead. Right now, it's a simple word for body, but I'm sure the author is talking about avatars. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.